evening, everyone, again. Seems like we're just here. So I'm going to call the select board meeting to order at 7:02 on November 16th, 2022. So welcome, everybody. We've got a one agenda meeting tonight. We're not going to do public comment at the front. We're going to do it at the end. The public comment will only be for the agenda topic tonight. All right. So on August 7th, 2021, Chief Achilles and then Chief Hollis came before the select board and requested that the select board support exploring the option of regionalizing our local emergency dispatch operation. At that time, the state had made available grant funds to communities wishing to explore dispatch regionalization. The select board approved the chief's request. A group of 7 communities, Grafton, Westboro, Hudson, Hopkinton, Northboro, Marlboro, and Southboro, formed a working group and obtained a grant that funded a study by the Edward Collins Center for Public Management to explore the ramifications of forming a regional dispatch center serving the 7 communities. Representatives of 7 communities, including our Chief Achilles and Chelsea Melanowski of the Select Board, met in the intervening months to provide data and feedback to the Collins Center researchers. On September 20th, 2022, the Select Board reviewed the report from the Collins Center and approved going to the next step in the process to decide whether to regionalize our dispatch operation. At that time, Ms. Melanowski reported that 3 communities, Northboro, Marlboro, and Hudson, had decided to drop out of the group. The Collins Center report was generally favorable toward regionalization and includes several benefits of doing so. So tonight, I'm going to turn this over to Chelsea and Chief Achilles to lead this discussion.
Thank you, Catherine. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. When the fire and police chiefs approached this board in September of 2021 to support conducting a study, I felt it was prudent to take advantage of a study funded by the state with several of our mutual aid partners. This was in no way attempt to try to eliminate anyone's position or diminish the importance of dispatch as part of public safety operations. It was to determine the feasibility of regionalizing. Recruitment has been a constant challenge for Southborough, even prior to regionalization conversations. It takes 300 to 400 hours to properly train a dispatcher to be able to work independently. In the last few years, we have trained several dispatchers to only have them leave. This is not a sustainable model for the town. In addition, it has become evident that a minimum of 2 dispatchers on shift at a time is imperative for when multiple events occur at once, although we need to be fiscally responsible in doing so. We appoint chiefs to run departments and bring initiatives forward. We have both chiefs sitting in front of us tonight, and ignoring their recommendation or having done nothing here to investigate this would have been irresponsible and candidly probably an indirect vote of no confidence. This study has not cost the taxpayers anything thus far. It was an important exercise to go through to understand if this could be a good fit for Southborough. Some may ask about the $20 million building that we built and what will happen to that investment. We are over halfway through the useful life of the equipment and dispatch and have $900,000 in the capital plan in a few years to replace it. The room may not be used as originally intended at 10 years old, but it will be repurposed appropriately if needed. Lastly, this is not something that I would want to see the town look at in 5 years and have less input into the location, setup, governance, or operation. There's a value in participating in building the foundation to best suit the town and our public safety officials' needs. Thank you, and I'm going to turn it over to Chief Achilles.
Well, thank you, and thank you, members of the board, members of the public, and members of town employees and different departments behind me. As was mentioned, and I thought tonight I would provide some historical context where we are, and I think Ms. Cook did a little bit of that. I also want to speak to our core philosophies of why we're looking to improve or enhance and strengthen emergency communications and how. I also have Joseph Crean, State 911 Director of Special Projects here tonight. And at some point in the presentation, I'd just like to have him come up and speak to the regional dispatches that are located throughout the Commonwealth, individual sites such as ours, and the state's commitment and process of grants. I think that would answer a number of questions that were outstanding from our last meeting. I know Chief Newell may or may not be on. I know he was out today.
He's on Zoom.
Perfect. But I think that we'd also like to answer any questions of this board and be prepared to answer any questions from any member of the public. Discuss options of public business and emergency access at the public safety building. And towards the end of this, we'd like to see where we're headed, especially based on the grant cycle. I know we're in middle of November, we have some holidays, and the grant cycle for next year, and I know Director Crean will mention this, but opens in January and closes in March. So we'd want to have some position of where we stand sooner than later. So let me start off with core philosophies. And again, I can't speak directly for Chief Newell, but in 2021, the state was really interested in looking into the Metro West region for regionalization of public safety access points or answering points, so 911 centers in dispatch. That was held in July with some members of our community attending. I was unable to attend, but there was an emphasis and encouragement to seek those opportunities. That came on the heels of then Chief Paulson and I were looking at opportunities to strengthen our emergency communication center. I came here 3 years ago, and that was one of my tasks for the fire department. And we realized that emergency communications in Southborough had been a little bit left behind. We've made a lot of strides in trying to enhance policies, procedures, training, at least from our side of it, that I can speak to make that better. And I think I've reiterated this more than once, that it's not a reflection on the individuals that work in dispatch. It's the system that exists, the process that we have, the resources we have that make it often challenging. And I'm speaking, from experience in our community and observance, seeing some areas that we can improve upon, much like we've done in the fire department. So whatever we do, and I will still commit to this, if this is not the path the select board would support, our dispatch center and our personnel need more, and our police and fire department need more. I think that's evident through the study. I think it's evident through both of our accreditation process that we move through there. We have some gaps. We recognize some gaps in our standard cover document we did in 2020 and 2021. So it needs to be strengthened, and it needs to be more reliable and resilient. So some core philosophies from the fire department. Whatever we do, we need to ensure timely and accurate assistance to the public. That includes pre-arrival medical instruction without interruption during a 911 call. Those people that have in our community a medical emergency or serious traumatic event need pre-arrival instructions, what to do. And it's imperative to me that it's not interrupted. We need to provide appropriate, predictable, and sustainable staffing according to the national standards. And I think the study had mentioned it, but that's two around the clock with a dedicated supervisor. We need to improve call processing and unit notification times to best practices and national standards. We need to provide dedicated emergency communications to responding personnel, ensuring critical information is transmitted and received. We also have to reduce emergency communication conflicts between the police and fire department. And I think this next one kind of leads to that, is we need to reduce our risk of errors and omissions that occur during multiple critical incidents. We need to provide some resiliency and reserve capacity for complex and simultaneous incidents. And we also need to reduce the delays in receiving resources. I think it's also important, whatever system we have, we maintain a quality assurance program And we enhance and improve the credentials and education and the competency levels of all our staff. I think investing in whoever we have in that room or in that part of the process is very important. And I think we also need to provide some dedicated credential and experience oversight. Myself as the fire chief, I know the police chief, we're not communications experts. And at times we have to be because it falls under our auspices. So those are core for the fire department, whether we decide to do a regional approach to this or we have a commitment from the town that we're going to do it in our own community. The reason we're interested in the grant process is because it provides funding opportunities and future funding opportunities for capital and operational and training costs that I think we don't have. If there is a commitment from the community to do those things, I think that's a different story. But I know Chief Newell and I, he came on late in the process, but that was one of the strong considerations is how do we move this ball forward and make sure it's sustainable. So those are some of the core things. As far as the history where we're at, I think, again, Ms. Cook spoke to that. I will add just that throughout the whole process, beginning in August of last year, I know Ms. Malinowski's provided consistent updates on a regular basis of where we're at in the process. Again, I can't speak for Chief Paulus or Chief Newell, but I know I've maintained communications with our members of the fire department of what the process is, what are the things we're looking for, and again, those core ideas. We met again in end of August with the interested communities to see what level of commitment, and that kind of was the precursor to meeting with this board in September. So there's a commitment of 4 communities. There wasn't to continue this process. Wherever we head, if we're going to move forward, we need to look at an intermunicipal agreement so that the 4 communities can collaborate and submit a grant for the process. So if we don't do it between now and March, then it's another year from now. And I think that would put us in a position of what are we going to do with our dispatch? I just don't want to keep on kicking the can down the road. It's something we have to address. I think for police and fire safety, the public safety, we have to do something. Again, whatever that mechanism is to get to that point, we have to decide that. And I think we have to determine that sooner than later. At this point, I would like to just have Joseph Crean from State 911 come up. Just look, again, show you the map, talk about the grant process, because I know there was some questions of, is it available? What does it cover? And how does it offset some of the upstart of this process? And again, we wouldn't look at regionalization as a process if we didn't have funding. So if you don't mind coming up.
Evening. So,
We have the map.
as the chief said, I'm Joseph Crean, I'm the director of special projects for the State 911 department. I started with the State 911 department in July of this year. Prior to that, I was the deputy director of a regional center on the South Shore of Massachusetts. I've been involved in public safety for about 19 years.
Can you just try to speak up a little bit?
Yeah, I'm sorry. So right up there is the current PSAP regionalization map. As you can see, the western part of the Commonwealth is pretty well covered. There are currently 31 active regional PSAPs or RECs in the Commonwealth, covering about 106 communities across the state. There are 2 in development, Acton Concord and Braintree Randolph, that will be starting up right around 2025. All of the centers that you see up there are kind of taken, or most of them took the same process that you guys are taking right now. Feasibility study and discussion. Those are the two biggest things that need to kind of happen with any community before you decide whether or not you're going to regionalize. What I have found is centers that started without having this conversation are the centers that kind of have hit roadblocks. So I commend you for taking this step and actually really looking into it, not kind of jumping into it blind.
Are there any questions on this from the board on this map? Because we're going to take it down, but
I've got one quick one. Why is it so Western oriented? Why is there such a big hole where we are?
I have no solid answer for that one. If I did, it would make my job very easy. In reality, a lot of the West is covered by the state police. The state police handles a lot of the Western Mass towns. So they have a couple of regional centers out there. Sherburne Falls, Northampton, they kind of handle that Western part. One of the things I can tell you in public safety, what I see is a lot of the good ideas and new industry trends tend to start out west before they make their way over to the east. So that could be what we see here in the Commonwealth, but the effort is still out there. All the regionals that are up and running are constantly trying to discuss with new communities. The department has up their grant program, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. The grant program started in 2008 with the Chapter 223 of the Acts of 2008. Then Governor Deval Patrick signed into law, which kind of started the PSAP regionalization movement. He created a grant funding program, which is through everyone's cell phone surcharge. Everyone here in the Commonwealth has a cell phone. You notice that you pay $1.50 a month. That's where the state 911 department funding comes from, and that's where the funding for these grants come from.
Question. But I don't know if you know the answer to this. Are there I see a lot of communities that currently aren't doing anything, but do you know if there's a substantial amount of them that are in an investigative phase like we are? I mean, is that where the trend is going?
There are communities, yes, that are in that investigative study phase. The Collins Center is who the department contracts with. There's down in the Cape, they're contracting with a few of the communities down there. There are other communities up in this area that are actively looking into it or in that investigative phase or trying to figure out, do we want to do a study? Is it worth doing a feasibility study?
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. I don't know if now is the right time to ask it, but one of the things that I'm interested in hearing about is, are there examples of where other communities attempted or formed regional centers and then ran into problems? And in particular, I wanted to ask about what experience we could learn from the Essex County Regional Communication Center, and which I think involved Amesbury, Beverly, Essex, Middleton, Thompson, and Lennox. So I don't know if now is the right time in the presentation.
I wouldn't know that answer, and I don't know if you do or.
I guess in terms of problems, can you give me an example?
I had just read a news article in the newspaper about how when it started, when they ran into a bunch of problems, and I don't know if it was at the management level of this center, but it's Mr. Davidson that brought it to my attention. And it's something I think that we should think about is, are there lessons that are learned from other experiences?
Yeah, it's funny. One of the first projects that I'm assigned is a study on regionalization, and I am actually in the lessons learned phase right now, trying to figure that out for you. I don't have an answer right now. I can tell you with the Essex County Regional, it was taken over by the state. The state has run it, and it's growing. Manchester by the Sea is slated to be joining the center, and some of it does come down to management. I've been to. Out of the 31 recs, I visited 14 and kind of have figured out that some of the problems that you run into is the management issue. Some of it is a lack of communication. There's no communication from the start. And that's kind of that big piece. You guys are asking the right questions, and that's the piece of it is you need to ask the tough questions now before you get into it, before you have a signed INA and you're locked in and you're a year into it and realizing, oh no, this was a big mistake. So it's good to ask the questions up front. I can try to put you in contact with the director of
Okay.
PSAPs for the Commonwealth, Allison Del Sol, and I can have her kind of walk you through
Okay.
some of the lessons learned maybe from their end. if
Okay.
That's okay with you?
I have a question related to that. If you're in the lessons learned phase, maybe you may know the answer. Are you finding that when you hire a district manager for the RECC or whatever is imperative to the success of the center?
Yes.
And when are you finding the most successful time to hire would be for that?
Right after you decide this is the road we're going.
Okay, so
The
having that
centers-
person in from the get-go,
Yes.
and then you determine your governance with that person in place. And
Yes.
so then you have control over the setup and you're in the know of what's going on.
Yeah, the governance piece, if you don't have a director by then, it's not what I've seen, the data that I've collected, it hasn't been a make or break situation.
Okay,
But it is nice to have that person in place so that they're not playing catch up or you're not trying to play catch up while you're trying to start your work up.
thank you.
Were you part of the one that you were in before you took the state job from the very get-go?
I came in when it was only 2 towns. So since I joined in 2015, the ROC, Regional Colony Communication Center, it took a town a year from 2016 on. Our last town was the town of Hanover, so we grew to 6 communities, so we went from 2 to 6. It is a task to bring new communities in. The lessons that I learned being a deputy director of a regional PSAP is that there are a lot of misinformation that's out there in terms of regionalization. Some of that being that, oh, no one's going to know where I am in town. That's false. The wireless capabilities of wireless technology has evolved immensely. There's programs out there, Rapid SOS, that provide pinpoint location to the 911 dispatchers. On top of that, what I found is that to be successful, your regional center needs to have a ride-along program, and not just a ride-along program of, hey, we just hired you, go right around town, a continuing education ride-along program. One of the things that I installed at the ROC was that to continue to be certified as a dispatcher for the year, you had to ride with at least one of our communities every year. And you went out there and you rode the community and you spent time with the officers, because the second biggest knock on regionalization is I never get to see my dispatchers. By sending our dispatchers out to the community, it helps bridge that gap, helps put faces to the name.
So one more question. This is, I'm kind of jumping in, but I think it's important. Okay, so process. Is there anything that you've seen that we've done so far? So tonight we need to make a decision as far as I think our next step because of the time. So this started over a year ago. There's been several meetings with the group. We've got our report from the Collins Center that is a very detailed, lengthy report. We're here tonight. Is there anything else you think we have missed doing as far as making sure we've done total due diligence as far as this goes before we start talking about the next step that you've seen others do?
No, absolutely not. You guys are following kind of I'll call it the playbook that I'm working on. And that is, you have the public behind me right now. And when the public is not involved, that's when you start to get into these, that's where you're not doing your due diligence. You're not hearing the full picture,
And we're going to take comments from the questions from the public too, but at the end of this. Okay, so let's talk about what the process might be to go to the next step. If the select board were to think that we want to go forward, that's an F, is the next step for the 4 communities to get together and try to construct a IMA that has to be done before you apply for the grant. In other words, you can't, when you go for the grant, you basically decided you want to do this, right? I mean, you're saying, we want to do it, we've got an agreement with the 4, and we're ready to now apply for the money to go do it.
So there's 2 roads you could go. Road A is what's known as a letter of attestation, which is the 4 communities or 5 communities get together and each town manager from the community just writes a letter to the executive director of the state 911 department stating that they are willing to work with all the communities to look into the idea of regionalizing.
Simple letter at the station from all 4.
Yes. Now, that puts you lower on the priority list. So the grant, the development grant, which is what really the bread and butter for PSAP regionalization. That's where new recs get their startup. It's based on priorities. The top priority is existing recs with an executed IMA. And this afternoon, there was a state 911 commission meeting. The commission voted to approve the development grant changes that the department has set to them. And the priority scale shifted just a little. The top priority is always recs that are existing, bringing in a new community. The second priority is development of current recs. And the third priority is the startup of new recs with an IMA.
Okay, so we're still three. We're still
Yes.
number three. Okay.
With the letter of attestation, you kind of move down further. Which doesn't necessarily mean you're not going to get any grant funding. It just means that you're lower on that scale.
But an executed IMA would get us number three.
Executed IMA will put you in the third tier.
I want to stay on this for another minute to make sure we understand this process. So what you said does ring a bell. So Chief Achilles led a group of us down to see the Pottsboro wreck a couple months ago. And the director there basically said what you just said as far as 1 and 2, but he did say, if I recall, that he didn't think that the state was funding any new wrecks. The state really was encouraging towns to hook on to existing recs, but it sounds like you're saying, no, there is a third.
No, that's false information.
Okay,
No,
so
there is.
can you, because that's really important here.
Yeah, absolutely. So the state, there is no cap or there is no determination of 31 recs and that's it. We will support anyone that wants to start up a rec. Anybody out there, any community that's in white up on that screen that would like to start up a rec, great. One of the caveats is if you are if you're Douglas and you're next to a regional center and you say, hey, I want to start one up, we're going to make you do some homework. We're going to make you tell us why you can't go join Southern Worcester County. But in terms of where you guys are, there's really no one around.
So you're not gonna make us do that.
You will not have to do your homework is done. But the state will always support PSAP regionalization. That's what we're here for. Or that's kind of what I'm here for, in terms of that area. So the fact that the director there said that there's no money available, it's false information. There is money available. We are supporting it. It's on the third tier.
But does the third tier mean that we might not get the full thing? Well, what does being on third tier really mean at this point, as far as what you can tell us?
So it basically is you're the third pass. So the existing centers that are bringing a new ton in, which as of right now, there are no centers as of today, as of whatever time it is right now, no centers bringing in a new community for next year. That could change. There are communities that are in active negotiations, with the SEMREC is one of them,
Okay.
but they do not have an executed IMA. The department is going to be petitioning, this was announced today also at the State 911 Commission meeting, is going to be petitioning the DTC for $40 million for the development grant, which is up from $30 million last year. So there's a chance that there'll be a $40 million fund available for PSAP regionalization. With no one bringing in a community right now, it moves to the existing recs. And then after the existing recs, it turns over to startup of new recs.
But there are some in the category 2.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
40 million sounds to me like not a big number for everything.
Believe it or not, it will be the largest development. If approved by the DTC, it will be the largest development grant to date.
So when applications come in, is it an all or nothing application?
Nope.
So
Nope.
you can get a partial piece of what you're
Yeah,
asking?
I'll walk you through the development grant. So you
Do it,
decide,
I'll put it up.
yeah, you can put it up.
Can we, would it help if we just did the grant thing now?
Sure.
Okay,
So I kind of hate, but it's really important so we understand where we're trying to.
well, that's
go.
why I think if you
So-
see the grants, at least you'll know, and I think that will maybe spark further questions or. And while it's coming up, I don't know this answer, because I wasn't at that regionalization conference, but, and I don't know if the director can do this, but why is the state trying to do this? Why are they supporting regionalization? Right? Is there a particular reason?
Yeah, in earnest here, it's what's best for public safety. And I believe I heard it when I was sitting in the back, a minimum of 2 dispatchers. In the interest of public safety, for me personally, I'd rather have someone dedicated to my call versus having to put me on hold to talk to an officer or, delay me in giving CPR instructions to a loved one because they have to get my call. Versus in the regional environment, there's a dedicated call taker, a dedicated dispatcher, a supervisor there as well. And depending on how big you get, there's more hands make light work. But in reality, it is to, one, reduce the number of PSAPs in the Commonwealth. If you look at it, the Commonwealth is, I believe, and I apologize for having it off the top of my head, we were at one point one of the most heavy populated PSAP states out of everybody, and we're pretty small compared to other states. If you look at California, they have less number of PSAPs than we do. If you look at New Hampshire, they have less PSAPs than we do. Maine is in the process of reducing their PSAPs. They went from 86 down to, I believe, 26. So this is a continued movement, I guess is what I'll call it. If you were to talk to anybody else in the western part of the country, this is how they run things out there.
Thank you. I thought that was important.
What I'll do is I'll skip through some of the grants because you guys are already, as not part of a regional, you're already available for them. The support grant. So this is the one you're should be already getting a support grant from the state. The only difference is when you become a regional center, you're then eligible for the incentive piece, which is a percentage of the pot or surcharge revenues. And it is anywhere for a regional emergency communication center, it's anywhere between 8 and 10% of that pot. It depends on how things kind of shake out. It's decided every year. And the support incentive grant is based on call volume and population. So
So you
that's
get that every year.
every year you get the support incentive grant.
Can you just, 8 to 10% of what? exactly?
The surcharge revenue. So I'll just
For
make up
the community?
The $1.50.
the $1.50 of your surcharge. So that's how the department is funded. It's funded through that surcharge rate. So I'm just gonna make an arbitrary number up here. This isn't factual or anything. Let's just say the total number is $150 million. Out of that $150 million, anywhere between 8 and 10% is dedicated to the incentive grant.
Okay.
And that is based on your call volume and population. So that's 911 call volume and population is how that both support and incentive is determined. The training and EMD grants, you're already eligible for as well as as part of, as being a PSAP, so you should already be taking advantage of those as well. Under SNI support incentive, what you can buy with that and what most regional centers do use it for, a majority of them use it 99% solely for staffing. That's what they use it on, and the rest is whatever's there. Some of them use it for staffing and some console shares. Some do staffing and maybe some CAD system upgrades. But most of the recs, a good majority of them use it for staffing. And
SNI is what?
as support incentive. So your support and incentive grant. So support is something that every PSAP in the Commonwealth is eligible for. The incentive piece is only available to regional centers.
Are we getting that money today?
Yes, we get 70,000 in grants that is not in the operating budget. That's for FY23.
The training grant is basically what it says it's there for. It's for training of your staff. And that is awarded based on the application received from your PSAP that says, hey, this is what I need to be in compliance with 560, which is the CMR that runs or sets the standards for PSAPs.
And just to be clear, the 70 includes this one too. So the 2 out of 2.
The one thing that's different in the training grant for regional centers is right now, single stream PSAP such as yourself is only available to get 16 hours of continuing education or 16 hours of grant paid training. Regional centers are afforded 32 hours, so an additional 8 hours.
Is that
16
per
hours of training.
dispatcher or?
That is per dispatcher, yes. So the training grant will pay for fees for online training courses. There's a scholarship that the Mass Communication Center supervisors put together that help send a dispatcher to a leadership training. There's training courses, whether they're hosted by the State 911 Department or a vendor of your choice that has been approved by the State 911 Department. Personnel costs, and that covers to send someone to training or to backfill, not both. You used to be able to do both. They decided, the department decided to make a differential. You can either pay to send someone to training or you can pay to fill the backfill. Training materials, books, that sort of stuff. And then there's lodging for training that's more than 90 miles away, and it has to be approved by the department. The Emergency Medical Dispatch Grant, all PSAPs are eligible to apply for that grant. There are no special provisions for regional PSAPs or RECs. And the EMD grant basically will pay for your emergency medical dispatch equipment. If you're computerized or card sets, it'll pay for quality assurance. So if you have staff that you want to send to run through your QA program or conduct a QA program, it'll pay to have dispatchers come in, whether it be off hours, and they can run their QA through that area. It also pays for what's known as a certified emergency medical dispatch resource, which is if you wanted to contract out EMD, it would pay to have someone else do it for you. And then lastly, and this is the big one, this is the development grant. So this is really where regional centers kind of are able to expand, start up. It's kind of how I looked at it when I was the deputy director of the regional center. It's kind of my wish list items of, gee, I really wish I could do that, but I can't. My CapEx I can't afford it through my CapEx. This is only available to regional PSAPs and regional emergency communication centers. Last year in FY23, it was a $30 million pot. This year, we are hoping to get approval from the Department of Telecommunications and Cable for $40 million. This is a competitive process, meaning that it is basically all in your application is completed, your project is moving forward, and it's all kind of decided. It's decided at the level of the State 911 Commission and the executive director of the State 911 Department. So what can you do with the development grant? These are the priorities, and as I finish this up, the department had not had the commission meeting, so these are the old priorities from last year: expansion, development of new. This year, as of today, the commission voted to approve the new guidelines, which will be published on the State 911 website, I'd say probably by next week. And the guideline, basically updating our existing regional PSAPs, moves up one. Everything else just kind of drops down. Allowable expenses under the development grant, there's professional services, which cannot exceed $75,000. That includes operational, staffing, technical, governance. So if you had some sort of consultant to get you off the ground, it would pay for up to $75,000 of that. The grant this year actually will also include a cybersecurity assessment under professional services, which does not hit the $75,000 cap. You can also use the grant for project management services. On top of that, if we can go to the next slide, there's your transition expenses. So personnel costs for PSAP director, PSAP deputy director. As you start up, this will cover the cost as you bring in, basically it will cover the cost for 3 years, but as you bring a new town in, 3 additional years get added to that. So the grant will cover your director, deputy director, basically every time you bring a new town in every 3 years. For a 3-year streak.
So you'd be incentivized to keep adding towns.
Yes.
And do the initial towns count as your first 3 years, or how does that work?
I will get clarification. I do believe that's how that works. Those initial towns
Okay.
count as. There's key support positions it'll pay for, HR, IT, finance. It all depends on what form of governance you're going to go. In terms of whether or not you need those key support positions. Certified telecommunicators for proposed centers. So you are what would be considered a proposed center. So this would pay for if you had to hire, which I assume you would have to hire additional staffing. It'll pay to send them through the certification process to become a 911 telecommunicator in the Commonwealth. So 40 hours of the PST1, 16 hours of the telecommunicator, next State 911 equipment training, and then the EMD program that you guys decide you want to go with. Training costs, again, for proposed centers, so any training that has to get done, whether it be for new hires that you're hiring or staff from your current center that are going to be joining the regional center. Transition award. So this one is a little fun. The transition award is given to the community that's going to host it. So I don't know if you are going to be a host community or if you're going to have another community host. But whoever decides to be the host community, so if you aren't going to be the host, your assessment is covered by the state for the first 3 years, 100%. Year 4, the state will cover the transition award at 50%. In year 5, the transition award will be covered by the state at 25%. Meaning you're not paying anything, really, you're not paying 100% until your 6th year in operation,
No matter what that number is.
no matter what that number is.
Can I just ask a question about that? Because I want to make sure that for the public listening, they understand. So that doesn't mean that we're not going to pay, we wouldn't choose to pay into some sort of capital stabilization fund so that we don't see a dip in operational budget and then a big upswing in year 5 and 6. Like we would have the opportunity to be smart about planning financially so that we plan for the future and, you know, I just don't want people to think that we're doing this to save money. That's not really what I think the focus of tonight is in particular. But can you talk about what towns have done financially in those first 3 years and then outward?
So I can't speak for every regional in the
Sure.
Commonwealth. I can tell you that what the SEMREC Southeastern is doing is there's the assessment, and then they have what's known as the special assessment. So, you know, your assessment's 300,000. You could decide, all right, well, here, take my 300,000, put it into a bank account almost.
Yeah.
There it is, it's in there. There are other recs that just that start up and get going, and communities just say, all right, I'll worry about paying for that, my $200,000 assessment in year 6, or the full $200,000 assessment in year 6. It's kind of community dependent. The state doesn't mandate anything. The state doesn't kind of, I don't want to say provide guidance, but the state doesn't kind of dip their toe in that water, so to say. It's all on how you guys want to proceed and what your governance says.
That's a question about this grant. I read, following Andrew's question about Essex County, that a newspaper story that said the state is paying the full cost of that initially. I'm assuming that happens through this transition. grant
So
for
the
a while.
state took over the Essex County Center. It is a state now on one piece now. So because the state cannot charge municipalities for services, none of the communities there pay any sort of fee.
What does it take to have the state take us?
Good questions.
If we misbehave in a particular way.
Unfortunately, I don't have an answer to that question.
Okay, rhetorical question.
The other allowable expenses through the development grant is architectural engineering. The big thing is construction materials, plumbing, electrical, cabling materials, labor, other construction or structural improvements to a facility, consultant services for construction. There's equipment, which is a litany list of things. I could be here until 10 o'clock tonight listing out what equipment you can buy with it. Radio systems, console furniture, CAD systems, anything that really helps process an L1 call, you can get under the equipment section of the grant. Purchase of a building. So if you're deciding that, you know what, the best place thing to do is find a building in X town, the grant will cover or pay for that piece of it. Before I get into the workshop, so that is how basically, or what that grant covers. So now the process, right? That's the big question. Was the process here? So you and the other communities decide you want to go forward, you sign your IMA, you're then eligible to apply for the grant. When you file the grant in the application, you determine the priority of things. So it isn't an all or nothing. It isn't a, hey, we're putting a grant application in, it's worth $5 million. And when you get it, the state comes back and says, nope, you get nothing. You prioritize what you think is the most important. So whether that is you in terms of the collective governing body of the regional center, or if it's a hosted environment, the director of the regional center, in conjunction with speaking with, whether it be the police and fire chiefs or all of the boards of selectmen for the towns that want to be part of it, get together and determine, all right, what are our top priorities here? How do we determine, what's going to be the best piece here to move this project forward? So when it comes to a startup, if you are realizing that, okay, hey, we decide for last year, we decide today, this is what we're doing. We're going to go forward. We're going to start a regional center. You're probably, let's just say 18 to 24 months out. So the staffing piece may not be needed on this grant. So maybe the staffing piece is my 4th priority. My top priority is getting a facility or renovating a facility. So you determine what that priority piece is. You determine that scale. The governing body of the rec determines what is the top priority. When the department gets your application, it gets reviewed. What they have done typically in the past is kind of like a Regis Philbin Who Wants to Be a Millionaire final answer type thing of, hey, we got your application. Are you sure this is the priority scale you want to proceed with? And you can either, or what I've seen, especially what we used to do at my regional center, is just go back and make sure everything was good. Or yeah, hey, that's what we want, we're good. And it gets sent through and then the selection committee reviews it. What I have seen is anyone that has put in for the development grant has gotten their top priority. Some have gotten their top 2 priorities. No one has ever been denied flat out.
Okay, so an example of a priority if you're brand new, like we would be to ask money for buying the building.
Buying the building, getting a director. Those are kind of the top 2 priorities for a startup.
Third might be
And-
the construction money.
Construct, yes, so if you need it, so that's the big piece is, as you get ready to apply for this grant, the regional center would need to understand or have that idea of, all right, do I need to buy a new building or can I renovate a current existing building? If we have to buy a new building, that would be, in my opinion, that's your top priority, is buying that new building. If you're renovating, your top priority is construction, to get the building up and ready to go.
So we can come back the following year and ask for the next.
Yep.
Have you had a lot of success with staffing from current local dispatch centers to regional?
Yeah, I mean, at the center that I was at, no one was turned away. We
Okay.
afforded everybody an interview. We didn't just bring everybody in. Everybody was afforded an interview process. Mainly it's just that safety measure of, I don't want to take another center's problems, or I don't want to take somebody that's not qualified for the job. But no one was turned away. Everyone was afforded an interview. Actually, the way we ran our center is any town that was coming in, they were interviewed first before we determined if we were needed to hire anybody from the outside.
Okay.
There are other centers that basically, or we're conforming, or we're taking everybody. I don't see any difference to it, aside from you're losing that checks and balances side of things. But other than that, a lot of centers take it basically on I need that institutional knowledge. Which is
Right.
key. That is, the institutional knowledge is key.
Right.
Because we would take the new town coming in, the staff that was coming on, we'd start them part-time with us. And we would train them up on our stuff, but in conjunction, while we were training them on our stuff, they would be training our staff on how things work in the community that they're serving.
Okay. I mean, I think that's one of the advantages to having it local to the towns that we're looking at it with, so that we can, provide that opportunity for our current staff. I think that's a big part for my position. Thank you.
You have to do the grant workshop.
The grant, you don't have to do the grant workshops. They're out there. I highly recommend them. The development grant workshop is going to be still in determination. They were looking at January 19th. However, there may be a state and local commission meeting, so it may move to the 26th. But it will be in the development grant packet that is available online. Once it's published, the date will be in there. I believe it's either January 19th or January 26th.
It's one day.
It's just one day and it's virtual. It used to be in person, but they moved it to virtual. So you go on there and this will walk you through the process, start to finish. The financial, Karen Robitaille, who's the director of finance, and her department do a phenomenal job at educating, whether it be new recs or even existing recs. It is heavily attended by by all the existing recs plus anyone looking to start a rec. Because they do a great job at kind of going over this grant top to bottom. I gave you a very high level overview. They get really into the nitty gritty.
Is there such a thing as a model IMA that the state has available? Or does-
So in the study that you had from the Collins Center, there should be a model IMA attached to that. If it's not on there, I can get you that.
I thought the piece of it that dealt with annual payment, it's based on a ratio equal between annual and call volume and population. Right?
Yeah, that's how most centers do it. There are some centers that just do an equal 50-50 share. Again, it all falls on the governments. There's the district model and there is a hosted model. The only major difference between a hosted model and a district model, the hosted model is hosted by a town. So let's just say Southborough, hey, we're going to be the host. You kind of then absorb or are forced to absorb all of that hiring, administration, reimbursements. So if you're applying for these grants, some of these grants you can do, they're reimbursable. So you shell the money out and then the state will reimburse you for that funds after the goods and services have been done. The district model it's its own complete separate beast. It handles it by itself. It doesn't rely on the towns for any sort of HR, legal.
So it's a separate legal entity, basically.
Yeah, basically it's a separate legal entity.
And I can tell you with the current 4 communities, that's the preferred model right now. But that would have to be determined.
Okay, so we've had quite a bit of pushback on this concept. So here's a couple of threads that are pretty common. One is, so you've got 106 communities that have done this, right? And the 31 PSAPs. Of the 106, there's a concern about going dark. That right now in Southborough, our dispatcher is basically the first person you see when you walk into our safety building. That's who greets people who come in. That's who he is. He or she is. So of the 106, do you know how many actually did go dark versus how many actually had another way to deal with the fact that the dispatcher was going to be sitting right there like they had been?
I cannot speak to how out of the 106, how many are actually dark. I can tell you that the center that I was at, we had all of our stations with the exception of Hanover was a dark station. And how they dealt with that is through technology. There's cameras in the lobby, there's a phone when you walk in, you pick up, it rings right into dispatch, an officer comes back. Hanover had with civilian clerks, Hanson had station officers. So 2 out of the 6 stations were
Not dark.
were not dark. The other remaining 4 were dark. And that was with technology. People come in, pick a phone up, it brings in the dispatch. An officer came back in if needed.
And that's something after he finished up, I know Chief Newell's on, we've been exploring that. What's that option? I don't think we have to have that answer before you try for the grant, but I know
Totally
that's,
agree. I mean,
but
we
I-
certainly haven't decided that, especially.
but we are, I know in the last 2 months, Chief Newell's been reaching out to particularly police departments that are part of regional dispatch centers to kind of get their kind of general feel. And again, I'll after Joseph's done, I'll let Chief Newell speak to that.
So that's one. The second one is we've also heard from various people that losing the local knowledge, that we might lose that ability to truly understand Southborough that our current dispatchers have, that we would be giving up a snippet piece of that if we were to go the regionalization. You referred to that a minute ago, we talked about the pinpoint, being able to pinpoint, a scratch on the car, whatever. So can you speak to that as far as whether you believe that's correct, whether it's not correct, or what do you think?
Honestly, if your staff is going to join the regional center, which is highly encouraged, that local knowledge carries over to the regional center. Now, do I believe that going regional kind of does? Yeah, it will slightly diminish that local knowledge. However, if you have a strong leadership in the rec that is forward thinking, they will understand that they need to combat that process as well in terms of starting up what we started in Duxbury, which is the ride-along program, to help build upon that and help bridge that gap and take that piece of it out, where it does become second nature. And now it's difficult to kind of ascertain whether or not the ride-along program works or not. We did, as silly as it sounds, kind of a virtual ride-along, where you sat at a computer with Google and you kind of went around, you learned the main roads. And to me, you know, outside of that, the local knowledge is something that can be taught, whether it be from your police and fire departments or the staff that's going to join the regional center in the start.
I have a question about the grant, the timing of the grant cycle. So is there any priority given to those that apply in January versus those that apply in March?
No priority given to when they happen. So the development grant, the workshop is in January. That's when kind of everything starts up. January is when you want to start getting all your stuff aligned. Any quotes you need, anything to that matter. The grant will be due, I believe it's going to be March 2nd or March 3rd is when the grant is due. It's due by 5 p.m. And so there's really no, if you get it in before then, you don't move to the front of the line.
Okay.
I can bring that back for next year's development grant.
No, it's fine. I just was curious if that made a difference or not. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So a couple things. So Chief, I appreciate at the beginning the list of concerns and things that you went through. You know, delay in receiving resources. I think that's key. The credentials and education oversight. I'm going to pick on your expertise a little bit from before you came, you know, to work with 911 and going to a center. What are the top 3 things that you can tell us, or the top 3 benefits of going to a regional center in your experience?
So, I mean, the obvious one is that cost savings, but outside of cost savings, it is that let more hands make light work. You have a mother screaming on the phone that my son's not breathing. If I'm a single stream dispatcher, I have to make a determination. Am I going to sacrifice getting hands on chest to get units going, or am I going to get hands on chest going and sacrifice a start of the fire department? So for me, it is that ability to upscale for these kind of emergencies or be dedicated to my call. You know, I didn't walk into the Rock as a deputy director. I started as a dispatcher, then I was a supervisor, the training coordinator, and then the deputy director. So I have been in these positions, especially, you know, major storms that come through. We're all privy to it. It could be a nightmare. Lines down, you have people calling left and right, when's power coming back on? Now one phone's ringing, there's a tree through my house. You know, back in March 2018, we were able to field every single call that came into our PSAP without rolling anything to our alternate PSAP, because we had the ability to staff up and recall staff in, which is, you know, okay, hey, we can do that here, but your 911 positions are limited. I'm assuming you only have 2 911 PSAPs in your, or 2 positions in your PSAP. You have all these phones ringing. Being in a regional center to be able to scale for these widespread, either whether it be weather emergencies or even unplanned, you know. The last piece of it is the wireless direct program. When I was with the Duxbury Regional Center before I became the supervisor, my, at the time, captain there fought tooth and nail to get the wireless calls into the center. And it started where, you know, calls went to the state police and then transferred into us. There's that little bit of a delay there, you know, and now it speeds up. Today at the 911 Commission, the deputy director of 911 brought up that the wireless direct program is estimated to have saved about 900,000 seconds in getting calls out faster. So for me, it is the cost saving is the obvious, but there's the scalability and that camaraderie and the teamwork that's out there to be, you know, it's not just either whether it's you're a single dispatcher in the room, you have other people around you could learn from, you can kind of gain from their experiences, work together to solve problems. That's my opinion.
Perfect, thank you. And just a question for Chelsea and Chief Achilles. And you touched on this before, but I'm just going to ask again because, you know, there'll be people at home that are watching this. What are the benefits of getting into a regional center early versus waiting till one is sent up and then trying to get on after the fact?
Well, I know that in our discussions with our mutual aid partners, this, and with Chief Newell is, something was brought about success of a wreck or not. We would choose to be in the driver's seat and design what it is. Policies, procedures, practices, the equipment, we would be determining what that is. So I think that by doing that and being on the ground floor has some distinct benefit for not just each town, but the dispatchers that work there. And for the police officers and firefighters of Southborough, we have say. There's gonna have to be some adaptation because you're gonna collaborate with your mutual aid partners. So some things might be different, but I'd rather be on the beginning end of that. And I think Chief Newell would concur that we want to be on that part of it. The second part, and what I understand, is if one exists and it's built out for 4 communities, and we're not part of that, and there's not a level of commitment from the town to address the areas that operationally administratively that we have concerns about, and 2 years from now, like, well, we can't get the fund, we should join the rec that's in our area. Is the rec able to take us on? So we might be going, we need to join something, but there's no opportunity. And I would hate to put the community and the departments in that position where it's broken and we have no opportunity to fix it. Or you're gonna have to wait 2 years because 3 other people have already submitted some request to become part of that regional dispatch. So that's my perspective. I think that's the same with the other communities that when we had our larger meeting, that when 3 said they were not interested in moving forward, the 4 communities said, we have interest because we don't want to wait.
That's going to be an interesting discussion among the 4 as far as how much extra room to build for future expansion. I mean, boy, that's going to be an interesting question. Okay.
I would also add that I think the partners, the mutual aid partners that are interested, we would gain the most benefit from working with. We rely on them. I don't want to speak for the chief, but I think most often we rely on those towns, mutual aid. And so if you think about calling 911 and your house is on fire, right? And you can keep me honest here that I'm saying this right. But you call 911 and let's say we need to call mutual aid. So that our dispatch has to then call over to Westboro, Hopkinton, whoever, and then their dispatcher has to receive that information and then tone out to their own department. And so this would just cut down on that time. And so there's a great value in us going in with these particular towns and not having Westboro and Grafton, join a Worcester one or something, for example. And then let's say one pops up in Hudson, and then we're forced to go to Hudson, and we're not with Westboro. Like there's a lot of benefit to the ones that we use on a regular basis.
But is it, so Marlboro and Northborough aren't as regular as Westboro and Hopkinton?
Westboro, Hopkinton, and Ashland are on our first alarm, our initial units. Marlboro is next. And then it gets wider from there. But any fire we have in our community that's an actual fire, we dispatch our units, and the officer in charge will request mutual aid, and those are the first ones that will come. So, and vice versa, we are reciprocate to these communities. So I think we talked about this before, that's why this group seems to be the most logical and beneficial to do that. But I know I want to make sure Joseph has more time to just finish what he was supposed to say, and then because I think the questions are going to start going into other areas. But
Okay, so back to you.
I just want to make sure that
No, thanks, Chief. But really, all that's left here is just what I kind of discussed. guidelines will be published in the next couple of weeks for the development grant. The applications are due usually that first week of March, and grants are awarded by July 1st. Outside of that, the training, EMD, and the support and incentive grant, those are published as they're updated. So the department did their update for the development grant because that's kind of the major grant that we want to push out for the regional centers. Now we focus on training, EMD, and the support and incentive grant guidelines. Any updates that need to happen. Those applications are due usually by the end of December. However, most centers operate on that fiscal calendar. So we kind of had at my center, all our grants were in for all of these 3 grants were in by the end of June so that I could have it, or even well before June, so I could have it for July 1 and start paying.
So if it works for you, Joe just he's under the gun. If there's any questions not related to the grants or the process, I'm willing to answer those. I know Chief Newell, if he's on and he wants to say a few words. But I know there's a number of people in the public that may have questions that we're open to answer. So.
You willing to stay with us?
I will, as long as.
I just think it's helpful because you were a dispatcher. And
Yeah.
I think you're going to hear from some dispatchers tonight, so I think you can help.
I just had one follow-up and then that's it, Kathy, and it's a quick question. So from starting the application process, getting approved, what is the average time frame to get a center up and going? Again, I'm not putting you on the spot because every center is different. If you
Yeah,
have a place to build or not.
It is, that's the big piece. So if you have a place to renovate, it's all on how long it's gonna take you to renovate. Right now, I can tell you that some of the big pain points we're having, or not we're having, but what I'm seeing in the dispatch world, and I'm sure the chiefs and the current staff at dispatch center that are working with equipment can kind of relate, is that there's a long lead time to get technology. The radio companies, Motorola, you put an order in today, they'll say, we'll see you in about a year and a half for all your stuff. So there's that piece of it that kind of plays into it. If you have no place to build, you got to build a new building, you're probably looking at about 24 to 36 months to get up and operational, ready to go.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. That's it, Kathy. Thank you.
Say it.
I have a question. Very interesting sort of mutual aid issue here in terms of, I've heard Chief Achilles talk about the importance of that. And I certainly understand that it seems to make sense that relatively contiguous communities band together for that. But as I looked at the map of the RECs in the state, there are 4 RECs that are not contiguous. And I'm curious if Barnstable's one of them, Old Colony, one of them, North Shore, and west out of Chicopee. Substantial geographic spread in those. And so my question is, I mean, how does that work? Well, as a REC without that geographic, I don't have any idea what their mutual aid structure is, but clearly they're not calling on communities next door for the most part.
No, so that can be a challenge by having I guess I'll call it an outlier, and I can speak from experience with Rochester. They were our outlier. They were 45 miles away from our center. They were a different, their mutual aid dealt with a different county as well. So there's that kind of problem there's that piece of it. So to combat that, what we kind of did to make them not feel like they were an outlier is a liaison program, where our supervisors are assigned to a community and every month they go out and meet with the chiefs there. In terms of the mutual aid piece, you're 100% right. You know, Duxbury, Plimpton, Halifax, Hanson, we're not going to Rochester. The mutual aid, the contiguous side of things helps in terms of that mutual aid piece of, hey, I need an ambulance from the next town over. All right, I don't have to call county control, or I don't have to call that next community via phone or radio. I can just send them right out. So it speeds that piece up. But as the outlier, there is that piece of, all right, I got to call county control, or I have to go to the next town via phone.
But I guess I've dug around a little bit and I've seen no evidence that those 4 RECs are somehow outliers in terms of poor level of service or difficult operation.
No, you know, and this isn't to sound crass, this isn't to sound ridiculous or not, but location, really where the rec sits is not an issue with today's next gen 911 system and everything that kind of comes into it. Okay. If you have a forward thinking director of the center that can help bridge the gap of right, we're a little ways away from these communities, then that issue can be solved.
So again, mutual aid is useful there, but not a deal breaker.
None.
Sex structure.
But they get no benefit by being regional from a mutual aid perspective,
Understand,
right?
Yeah.
So I think that's part of what is important for us.
but maybe no penalty either.
I-
Distant mutual aid.
I mean, as a resident, I would rather have Westboro on their way
Me
and,
too.
and still be talking to the dispatcher while they're coming than having the dispatcher leave me to
But
call.
if we were in a rec that was centered in Greenfield or someplace, we could still have a mutual aid arrangement with Westboro, Marlboro.
Right, but you would want to make sure that the dispatch centers,
You wanna talk to them.
our preference is the dispatch center dispatches our mutual aid also, and vice versa. So that would be the distinct benefit that we see, and based on our size of our department,
Yeah.
we rely heavily on mutual aid for any significant event in our community based
Sure.
on our resources.
Yep.
So I think that would be different if we were a much larger community
Mhm.
that had more absorption with our full-time staff.
Yep.
And I think also Hopkinton and Westboro are kind of in the same boat.
And I certainly appreciate that point, and I think mutual aid is a critical factor to operate effectively for all these communities. But I guess I'm still struggling with if you had a communication system that would connect through the rec or from one rec to another or whatever in that process to allow responding communities through mutual aid to communicate effectively with one another. The physical distance is less critical than the communication connections,
I guess
I guess.
your point would be is if the rec was in Concord, Mass.
Yeah.
We'd have to ensure that Westboro, Hopkinton,
Wherever.
and us would be out of that same location.
Okay.
And I know this came up at our last meeting about the Foxborough site. I did reach out to all the 4 towns, and at this point, there's still no interest in using that as our rec and all 4 and joining that one.
In the current group that we're talking to.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Andrew,
Clarify in terms of we're interested in going forward, what's the next step in terms of where the intermunicipal agreement? It sounds like we have to make a decision about whether we want to enter into the intermunicipal agreement or just a letter of attestation. Is the thought that the letter of attestation is just a lower level of commitment, and that's why it's
is it 4? So if the IMA is 3, right? For
Yes.
a whole new one, is the letter estimation number 4?
No, yes.
So there's 4 tiers?
There's 5 because there's what's known as a regional secondary PSAP or regional secondary PSAP. So out in Lynn, there's a couple of regional secondary PSAPs, which is it rings to one PSAP and it's for another community they transfer.
Satellite kind of thing.
Yeah.
So Andrew, I'm coming back, but just to
Okay.
clarify what, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? Does the money get used up in that order? So if there's no money left and you get to 3, there's no money left?
No, it's basically every application is reviewed and determined. Basically, it's what's the merit here? What's the project like? Is it a completed application? That's one of the biggest things. Is your application complete to follow the guidelines? And as I said, what I have seen is everyone that has put in for the development grant, no matter where you fit on the priority scale, has gotten, whether it be priority 1 or priority 2, they've gotten what they've kind of been prioritizing.
But are we at risk for getting less if we were to do the easy thing, the letter versus a true, signed, sealed, delivered IMA?
Yes, that is a risk that you would take.
So my recommendation, Mr. Turlington, is to for this board to provide some official support for an IMA or not. That, and I think that needs to be done so before January, so that one, we can communicate to the other 3 communities that we are committed in trying to apply for the grant.
Are they on the same calendar that we are at this point?
I believe they are.
Have many of them committed to an IMA at this point?
Well, because we're still where we're at, I think after this meeting, if we have some better guidance, I will be reaching out to the mutual aid partner and say, this looks where like we're going, but I think if we don't do anything, they'll have to do what they need to do.
And I'm just looking at the draft IMA that's in, it was at the, like an addendum to the report, feasibility report. I mean, it's interesting because you first start to think, wow, that sounds really complicated. 4 towns negotiating, entering into a IMA. It looks like a lot of thought was put into this. Draft IMA proposes certain governance structure, et cetera. Is this a model that has been used for other community IMAs for Rex? And speak to that. What was the process? I don't know if you are familiar with this.
That was done by the IMA
Okay.
that you're seeing is
Covered
done
the
by
Collins Center.
the Collins Center.
Okay.
It's not something that the State 911 department put up,
All right.
but that has been, the Collins Center is who has been doing these feasibility studies.
Could you? How about this? Do you have some ideas about, from your experience, best practices and things to have in an IMA that are fair, workable, et cetera?
I will tell you, the IMA that you're looking at is the one I would go with.
It's the one you work with?
It's the one that
You go with.
it's the one I would go with. It covers everything.
And I,
That
and I,
IMA does cover. Tom does a
All
great
right.
job and covers.
and I know, just to add on to
Okay.
that is, if we're gonna move forward, I think the town administrators from the different communities and the legal counsel, town council for each community would look at this and say, okay, what works within that template? What works for these 4 communities? So in the relatively near future, the decision is, yes, we want to do this, then I think that's the next step with Mr. Purple and our council, along with the other ones, to meet and go, okay, what do we need in this so that we can officially submit for the grant? And we feel comfortable that this is something we could live with. So I don't want to delve too much in the IMA tonight, because I think that it would be determined based on where are we going with this? And then the 4 towns would decide. But I think Mr. Purple and the other administrators would look at that and go, what makes sense for us? I don't think we'd be doing it from scratch.
No, this is a very detailed.
Pretty thorough, yeah.
Yeah.
So is that it for the board? Okay, so.
Did you hear from Chief Newell?
Oh, that's true. Is he still here with us?
Yeah, I know he is. So it's is there anything else from the board that I can answer?
Well, let's see how the
Okay.
public comment goes. We may
Okay.
come back with.
No, I am here.
Okay, so, Vanessa is going to bring over to. Hi, Chief Newell.
Hey, excuse me. Hey, everybody.
We know you're under the weather, so don't worry about anything else. So,
Yeah.
You're on. What are you going to tell us?
No, again, my apologies that I wasn't able to be there tonight. I definitely feel like tonight is an important night where information is shared. I think there's, the first step in looking at our issues with our current dispatch system. My dispatchers are fantastic individuals and they do an excellent job and they need more help. So I think we need to look at each avenue and think about, what other ways can we provide them with what they need. And, you know, like I explained to some people, you know, I kind of got into this at the very end. So I am kind of playing catch up on a lot of this stuff, but I have been reaching out to other departments to find out, you know, what their process has been when they join a regional center. And, you know, everybody's different, it seems like, you know, and I think it really will have to come down to what our town decides to do. You know, either way, you know, I just want to say that our dispatchers need more assistance in handling their calls and doing what they need to do for the residents. And in doing that, I think you know, that's part of why with this is that we need to explore other avenues to say that we covered all of our bases, you know, if that is going to be the next step.
Thank you.
Again, sorry I couldn't be there tonight.
Totally understand. Okay, so what we're gonna do is take people one at a time. So you come up to the table, introduce yourself, and go from there. So come on up.
Keith Wittes, 32 Bigelow Road, also Vice President of the Police Union. So I've already spoken to this briefly before. Now I understand it's more in the infancy stage, so I don't have to be quite as worked up as I was. However, that being said, so initially we started with 7 towns, and now we're down to 4. Who would have the answer as to why that's happened so rapidly? Anybody?
I've asked the question. I think Chief Achilles has the answer. So yeah.
Sit right here with me. Let me, and I want to pre-say too, to the fire chief, police chief, and representative here from the state. Things that I'll say have nothing to do with them. I think the state's done a good job picking, I'm sorry, I forget your name. I don't want to call you that fella. This individual to come and represent what, you know, they're looking for. Fire chief is doing a wonderful job at doing what it is he's trying to accomplish, and my chief as well. Both chiefs I have a lot of respect for, but it's going to sound like I don't by the time I'm finished.
So when there was a meeting in July of last year, they were looking, state representatives, the lieutenant governor, representatives from 911 were looking at the Metro West region for a PSAP. So it was really focused on the communities around us, which included Hudson, Shrewsbury, in addition to the towns we talked, Marlboro, and even included Ashland. After that, there was a group of 7 that decided they would want to do more and look at it, do it further. Each one had their own interest. What was the precipitating factor? I can say, and I already spoke to what ours were, but, and I can't quote any of the other towns, but I think Northborough had a particular reason why they didn't want to do it. And that's why in August, after almost a year of the process, we asked the communities, do you want to move forward or not? And they chose not. Marlboro, the same thing. I think they had a reason why they were doing it. And I don't think it was
21, not 22.
Sorry, so it started in 2021.
Yep.
And in August of 2022, we had a meeting that was to determine who was in or out, because we wanted to move forward, because now we have to start figuring out costs.
Those 3 stayed in for a year and then
Yep.
they dropped out.
So that's why I would respectfully say, I don't think it was abrupt. I think there was a lot of vetting out from each community. And Hudson decided it wasn't, again, that's something they wanted to pursue.
Did we know why?
Everybody has a different reason.
But do we know the reasons? I mean, he's
Well-
asking specifically, do we know?
I don't know why you'd have to, I don't want to speak for or presume what their reasons were. I don't think that would be appropriate. I think if you want to ask their leadership of their community, I think that would be better. But I don't want to assume why they did or didn't.
And well, just 2 of these are the larger communities that just naturally the position they're in, they wouldn't be in a position to realize as much potential benefit from utilization as a town like some of the other four remaining entities.
Again, I can't speak to why. I can tell you, I just want to make sure you understood it was not, clever, it wasn't abrupt. It was not abrupt.
Thank you.
I'll be close.
So, so just to continue with that, I think that as a board, I think you guys would want to know that answer. I think that would be an important thing to know. I don't think any assumptions should be made. I think it's a question that could be asked, and yeah, they have the right to tell you, it's none of your business, but I think it's important that you ask that. That being said, so we have four towns now dangling in the wind. And I think I would be much more comfortable as a resident going forward with something, anything, if we had any representatives from any of the other towns that are going to be involved in this. We don't. Why are they not here? You know what I mean? If we're talking about going regional and we're talking about where other communities are at, well, we need to be able to ask them questions too. You know, we're talking about these questions as to who's going to head it, what percentage are you going to pay, whatever it might be, who's going to staff it. We need to be able to ask those questions of those people as well. And we're talking about signing something, and I feel like we're really being put under a lot of pressure in signing something before this January deadline when we don't really know where the other towns are at. So of course, me being me, I took it upon myself to call other communities and talk to dispatchers. So I talked to, and I can't say exactly who because that wouldn't be fair. But you know, for example, Grafton's still a community that's still in, correct? Yeah, so they're in. But then my question would be, if Grafton's still in, how come the dispatcher I spoke to had no idea of the status of what they were doing with regional, or where they were going with regional, or if they were going to go regional? So if we were all in a position to move forward with regional dispatch, don't you think that those dispatchers in that community would at least know that? They don't. That's a problem, right? I think we can all agree on that. That's an issue, because here we go. We're talking about maybe signing into something this evening, and we don't even know where they are. Do you know where they are? Does anyone know where
We're
they
not
are?
signing anything tonight.
No, I know, but we're talking about it. What I'm saying is, if we're talking about signing something and they don't even know what I'm talking about, other than, yeah, we've heard it mentioned, but other than that, I have no idea what we're talking about. That's a problem. So we could check that one off the list. Now we could be down to 3. I think other people might be able to speak to other communities. I don't know. That's just one that I happened to call because I was looking for detail officers for a day. So I said, why don't I ask a question while I'm talking? It's interesting. It's just discouraging that there's, again, no representatives here from those towns. We need to know where they stand as well. You know, we're talking about this not being about money, and unfortunately, everything we've been talking about tonight is money. And that's what we're talking about. So let's, you know, and again, this is where I don't want to offend you, the gentleman from the state, but fewer PSAPs for the state means less money. And that's really what that boils down to, because they're not really concerned with what's happening in Southborough. They're not concerned with what's happening, you know, in Hopkinton. They're not concerned with any of these communities. They have a job to do, and I understand that. They need to, let's narrow this down. Fewer PSAPs means less communication equipment and everything in regards to that. And plus less management, because you don't need as many people to try to manage all these PSAPs that are out there. And, you know, in the end, it streamlines it for the state, and that's great for them. But is it good for our community? Absolutely not for our community. And hopefully that point is made. And I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but let's talk about it, right? Isn't that when it comes down to it? And you're talking about coverage on dispatch, and I'll get to that too. But it's PSAP costs money. You put up these grants. It's the dangling carrot to these communities to say, oh my gosh, look at all this money we're getting in order to do this. And that's a great investment for the state, because you put up all this money now to build us a building or give us these grants for training or whatever it might be, because ultimately it's going to save money in the long run. That's not going to save money tomorrow or even the next 10 years, but in the long run, that's going to save a lot of money. That's great, maybe for smaller communities, and which I won't speak to. And, we were looking at that map, and as we look at that map, and we talked about, why is it so heavy out west? It's not because things go west and then move this way, it's because those towns are this big. You got Florida, Heath, Peru, you know what I mean? What are those towns? People don't even know they exist. So what do? You stick them on a regional. You stick them on a regional with Sherburne Falls, what do they have? Water, trees, eagles, and a Home Depot and a 99. So that's where you put them. So you push them all together, that makes sense. Community art like ours, absolutely not. In regards to staffing, so say we had a regional with these 4 towns, so 4 of us total. How many people would be staffing that dispatch center at one time, at any given time?
It's in the report.
Minimum 2. A lot of towns are on 2 right now for 1.
So I just want it to be accurate. So it's 2 or is it 4? If it's in the report, what do we have? Does anyone have that?
I'm pretty sure the report states that there's 1 dispatch, director. There will be a supervisor for every shift, and at minimum, day runs with 2.
She's got to come up.
Okay, so we've got, this is on Zoom, so we've got an audience listening to this, and if you're out there talking, they can't hear what you're saying. So we've got to keep everybody coming up to the table.
Yeah, I was hoping you had it in your report.
So come on, introduce
Hi,
yourself.
my name's Kylie Davis. I am the president for the Dispatch Union of Hopkinton. I've read through that study, and if I'm not mistaken, I believe that the rec center at minimum staffing runs with a head director. There is a dispatch supervisor on each shift, so 1 for the day, evening, and overnight. And at minimum, there's 2 dispatchers on during the day. I believe it's 3 on the evening and 2 on the overnight. That's minimum staffing. And what I should stress with minimum staffing is that that's what they budget for. So at the very least, they have to run with that. There are a lot of departments that just run at minimum because maintaining bodies, especially in this field, is very difficult. So if that's what's expected, that should be expected.
So 2, okay. Minimum of 2 on what?
So I believe it's 2 on days
Yep.
with a supervisor.
Yep.
3 on evenings.
Yep.
And 2 on overnights. I can tell you Hopkinton runs 2 24 hours a day. Westboro runs 2 24 hours a day. Southborough, I understand, is 1. And I can't speak for Grafton.
So while you're here, where are you folks at with regional?
To be very frank, the town approached the board in October and gave a very blanket statement of we're interested in continuing to pursue the idea of a regional center. However, no further information has been given. They did post the study on their website, but it is blanketed within the website. The board itself doesn't know much about this process, nor does the town. Our dispatch union is currently trying to meet with our board in order to give them just the information that's within the study.
When you say board, what board?
Board of Selectmen.
So you're saying your board of selectmen knows very little about this proposal?
Correct. Both chiefs are in favor, but everybody else is kind of left in the dark.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so we're talking about staffing, and so, we'll put money aside now we'll move on to staffing, completely agree with both the chiefs. Our dispatch definitely needs, some assistance in terms of staffing. I think that's something that we can definitely accomplish in-house. Because now if we're talking regional, we're talking about the instance and of a storm, for example. Well, isn't it going to be better, more hands, makes lighter work. However, If you have on the day and you have a storm come through and you have 2 people at this dispatch center, right? Storm doesn't just happen in Southborough, a storm happens in every town. So now you have 4 towns having a storm. So now instead of us at our current levels, which are not enough, having 1 dispatcher, technically we'd have half a dispatcher. It's trying to be sold that we're getting more for our money, and that is completely incorrect. You get a little storm coming through here, whatever it might be, snow especially. You now have, because you're at a minimum, why are you at a minimum on that day shift? Well, because people can't get in because it's snowing. Okay, so now we get a half a dispatcher. How does that benefit the town? How does that benefit the police officers? How does that benefit the firefighters? I don't know. Can't speak for firefighters, but in terms of police, that doesn't benefit us at all. So that just right there doesn't make any sense. Let's see. I already talked about that. I'm hopefully wrapping up for you here. I just want to make a few points. Oh, the study, I have to go back to the study, and I hate beating that one up, but I'll talk about the town study first. Here's another thing. Here we're trying to explore this opportunity for regional dispatch, which is very rapidly showing that it's really not a benefit to us. However, that being said, the study last year, I don't know, about a year ago, of the townspeople showed, it was even, I believe, a headline on my Southborough saying that the town was satisfied with its current police service. You know, stop me if I'm wrong. So if we're already satisfied with that as a community, why would we explore something else that ultimately is not going to benefit us? Does anyone have a comment to that? Okay, so and then there's the study that came out that, you know, police officers and firefighters might have known, I can't speak. Police officers, none of the police officers knew about this study that came out that was done where they, you know, they spoke with the chief of the fire department, they spoke with the chief of police. And it was referenced by the fire chief last meeting that, you know, during the study, you know, we spoke to the stakeholders. And I almost fell out of my chair when that was said. A stakeholder, as we know, are the people that are actually affected by this, not only involved. So that would be the community, that would be the police officers, that would be the firefighters. Nobody in the community, they didn't talk to anybody in the community. They didn't talk to any of the firefighters. They didn't talk to any of the police officers. Talk to a chief and a chief. And what are both chiefs going to want? If I was a chief, you know what, I can't say. But I think regional, I might look at, because listen, they have the staffing issues. I understand that. And how nice would it be to no longer have a staffing issue or have to deal with dispatch? I had a past chief that did not want to deal with dispatch, and that's why he initially signed on to this. We all know that. We were told that to our faces. Didn't want to deal with it, not because it was a benefit to the town or benefit to the people or made us any more safe. It was never even mentioned. Don't want to deal with dispatch. Great. I do believe the fire chief and our current chief, them wanting to strengthen our dispatch and make it a easier place to work or more beneficial for the townspeople. I believe they are coming from the heart for sure. But 50% of this is initially started with someone that just didn't want dispatch. So let's remember that too. We can't just forget that. That's enough for me right now. Thank you very much.
I wanted to just clarify what the young lady from Hopkinton dispatched. In the addendum for the report, she is correct that the minimum was 2. But she failed also to mention that it's expected that 5 dispatchers will be on during the day, 6 at night, and 4 over the midnight. That was the plan. I also want to just clarify that this is the recommendation from the study. This does not determine the minimum staffing or the maximum staffing. That would be determined by the communities that go into this and what level of service they expect. So again, she was correct about it says for minimum. again, but I think she failed to communicate what was the other part of the staffing recommendation that we would have to determine.
Wait a second.
Thank you, Chief.
Does everyone know that there is an addendum to the report? Okay, you've got that.
Okay, just want to add again, before moving forward with anything, we would need to know, then if he's saying that was just a suggestion, townspeople need to know, what is it going to be? How many is it going to be? That's a big, big question that needs to be answered. Can't move forward without it.
My name is Mike Cunningham. I do not work for Town of Southborough. I used to. I worked here for many years. I came over because I actually talk with Kyle on a regular basis and he was telling me what's going on with stuff. I actually work for the town of Ashland and I also work for the town of Ocam. I am a 911 emergency dispatcher for the town of Ashland and I am a police officer for the town of Ocam. I have experience of working out of a regional center. For small, tiny towns, it's going to be the Rutland Regional Communication Center, Emergency Communication Center. For small, tiny towns, yeah, that kind of works. When you have one officer on patrol, or maybe two officers on patrol in a town and a volunteer fire department like that, it does work for that. But for a town like this, where the call volume is much higher and much busier, it's not going to work well. As a matter of fact, I have friends who have worked for some regional centers, and the problem with that is they are constantly running into people leaving because they don't have enough staffing. And there's always forces that are happening. And these forces are happening that are causing people to not have any days off or limited days off at best. And it's extremely frustrating with them. To address what the chief was saying in regards to mutual aid for other towns, after their first alarm they have, if they have any type of fire call, after the first alarm, the additional alarms get transferred to District 14. Are you guys familiar with that at all? Okay, so District 14 is a gathering of many towns. I believe it's 22 towns that operate on one district. That district is out of the Ashland Fire Department. Okay, we man that over there. We have a separate police and separate fire dispatch center. So there's two dispatchers on it at all times in our town. Once that call goes over there, we handle getting the other towns to your scene. We go over radios, we go over phones if we have to, and we get those towns over there. In the case where you may have a motor vehicle crash with multiple vehicles or something like that, or multiple patients and they need additional ambulances to respond, well, yeah, then you are calling over the radio or you are calling over the phone. However, 9.5 out of 10 times, every single one of us, we're monitoring all the towns around us. We have 9.5 out of 10 times, we have that ambulance going before they call over here because we're listening to that call. We know they have a call going on. We know what's going on over there. Because we've been trained up to do all this stuff, all right? Now, in the towns around you, yeah, most towns around you have two dispatchers at all times, all right? Is that something that you guys should probably consider? Yeah, probably be a bad idea. It's a benefit for the town to have that. And all the towns around you who have it, Hopkinton, Ashland, Westboro, Framingham, they all have it and it works well. Even Marlboro, they all have it and it works well having the two people on at all times. I don't know as far as as far as going forward, with looking at this, I agree with what Sergeant Wood says. When you look at that map, those smaller towns out there, yeah, that's where these centers make sense. Because these towns are, I mean, I patrol a town that has a population of 1,851 people. It's the town of Ocam. Feel free to look it up on your computers. The town next to me, they have a population of just over 1,000 people. So for these small towns, it's great. For here, it's not going to work. You have too many calls to you guys. Look at what you guys covered. Not just all here in Southborough here. You also have main roadways. You have Route 9. You have 495. You have the Mass Pike. And both police and fire respond up to those when they have a call up there. On top of that, they know these towns. We all know our towns. Okay. For example, we have in Ashland. Okay, we have two Dairy Queens. The old one is closed and a new one. So when we get a call, someone's like, "I might buy the old Dairy Queen. I might buy the Dairy Queen." I know what that is. If you have a regional center and someone's never spent, has not spent time in the town, they don't know the town. They live in Plainville, Massachusetts, and they just work in this regional center. They don't know where that is. These are things you need to consider when you're taking this, when you're taking the time to decide if this is going to be something you want to go for or not. I don't believe it's a good fit for any of these towns, and my town's not even considering it, so I'm happy with that. But I'm just saying,
Your tone is what?
we're not even considering it. So, I mean, not something I'm worried about. But I know from working over here, I mean, I've taken some pretty crazy calls over here when I worked over here. And a perfect example is we had a call one night, I had a mother on the phone, 6-month-old child in her arms. She's literally yelling into the phone because her child stopped breathing, is turning blue because they were choking. I was over the radio, I dispatched police and fire, and I was able to talk with her and give her the instructions she needed to be able to give a child back blows to help that child. Because I've been trained up and I know how to do the job, as does everybody here. We've all taken these calls and we know what we're doing. When you get into these regional centers, you no longer, as the town, have control over what's going on with their training. This is the state that's handling all this now. It's just some things that I think you guys should really think about before, you make a decision on what to go forward with this thing. Like the map showed, out in Western Mass and some of those small towns in Central Mass, sure, I can see where this makes sense. Because I worked out of one of those. For busier, more populated areas like this, I think you're gonna end up regretting it. And I know some towns have already pulled out of some of these, and I'm sure you have the information on that. They've left it because it has not worked for them. Anyway, I just came over because I was talking with Kyle about this. I just wanted to say my piece on that.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Sit through that. Right. For the benefit of some of you maybe, or audience out there, my history, personal history is I served on the Western Fire Department for 43 years, 27 as their chief, and I did 11 years here as a dispatcher in Southborough. That's kind of my little retirement job. I don't like endless studies. I think cities, small towns like Weston, Southborough, all this, spend too much time and too much money studying things when the obvious answer is right in front of us. It's my personal opinion that the state is the prime mover behind all this for some of the reasons that Sergeant Whitterson, but they are the prime mover. They're dangling a lot of money in front of all of us. They dangle it for, my understanding is for 3 years. And then we have an unknown budget after that. We don't know what it's going to cost us after that. But any fiefdom, if you want to call it that, comes with a cost. To the best of my knowledge, I don't know. None of you have ever served as a dispatcher. Probably haven't had too much exposure to it to know what really goes on. Okay? My thoughts that this town should be looking at how they can improve the current situation. You have built a brand new public safety facility with a state-of-the-art communication center. There's a couple of problems with that. Number one is there aren't enough people in it. It should be, everything costs money. You've got to bite the bullet if you want to make it the way it should be. You should have a minimum of one dispatcher dedicated to fire and one dedicated to police 24/7. They can be, if the shit hits the fan, one can, work with the other. They don't,
say it's a big fire, this doesn't necessarily have much police problem, but other than traffic. Both of them can work together on that. I find it surprising that we talk about mutual aid, particularly fire mutual aid. That's all, that system is all there. There's a 10-alarm running card. It's a matter of a phone call or just, and like Cunningham said, everybody that's on, if they got any kind of knowledge whatsoever, they know what's going on. They hear what's going on in other communities. And they can, a lot of them can act. They don't even need the phone call. They know what's going on. They hear on the radio that Southborough has struck a first alarm. Westboro knows that they're going to come here and keep it to a fire. That mutual aid system is the best thing going for all these towns and the city. Where else can you make a phone call or make a radio call and you get millions of dollars worth of equipment and manpower for no cost whatsoever? That system has been established when I was in Weston. We had a 32 cities and town dispatch, 10-alarm card. Everyone from Boston to out to Weston. All pre-planned, all on paper. All they had to do was say, I've got a second alarm. It was all automatic. It exists here. Okay. We got to do, you got to spend the money. You need another dispatch. Neither the police chief or the fire chief should be can properly supervise the communications center. There's always, you can hear the fire don't get along with the police, or the police don't get along with the fire. There's always going to be personnel problems. Neither chief can probably supervise that. You should have, in addition to this other dispatcher, you should have a supervisor. Make it another entity, whatever you want to call it, that is the communications department. Separate entity. Was the other, the two gentlemen involved, and I have great respect for both of them. But that shouldn't be, they've got enough problems with their own personnel, with their own departments. They shouldn't have to be worrying about the communication center. What they should have is someone in the communication center that they can go to. They got a problem with a dispatcher or with what went down and what didn't go down. They can go to them, to that person, and attempt to straighten it out. It can't be human nature. There's going to be disagreements no matter where you go. Let's see. I think really, if you go to regional dispatch, you've given up your control over what you have locally. You probably have next to nothing say in who gets hired there, who the supervisor is there. You've got 4 communities in there. Keep it locally. Keep it where you can keep your finger on it. You can dictate who's in there and what goes down. I said I don't like study committees, but I'll tell you right now, if two of us, 2 retired folks from Weston in this town, retired police lieutenant John Lyons, who served on the building committee, who him and I both way back it's funny you say Northboro's doing it. Way back, the town of Weston studied with the joint region. And Northborough was one of them. Northborough decided out, Westborough decided out. All that they ever told me was, every budget year, we don't have money for this, we don't have money for that. You know, can't spend this, we can't spend that. And then they wanted to go and take on a big burden of a regional dispatch center. And I think at the same time, we were off for 3 years. I think I've covered everything that I can cover. I'll volunteer to help you if you want to get into the local stuff. You're more than willing. I'm looking for something to do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Bonnie.
Good evening, all of you. I'm Bonnie Kent, 179 Middle Road. I know some 21 years ago, I had suggested to the advisory board that they separate the police dispatch center out of the police budget and have it stand alone, and also recommended that they have a director of that department. I'm not going to repeat everything John said, but I think the decision before you is premature. I don't think we have all the information. Any one of us that had scanners in our houses, in our homes, and our businesses for the last 47 years understands District 14, understands the mutual aid agreement. But the confusion I have here this evening is when you're saying it's an intermunicipal agreement. Is there a time limit that has to be renewed?
Look at me.
Renewing it every
So
year,
That. will-
every other year.
And the agreement will specify that. There'll be
All right,
part of it, we'll talk about that.
all right, but we don't know.
But be specific, tell us what you think we haven't done. Why this
I think you
decision
need to
is
do more research on what we have and how to improve on it. That's how I will approach
So
this.
your vote is to keep it local and.
My
shore it up
goal would
here,
be to keep it local,
And shore it up here.
yes. And without having those numbers, and we have a brand new police public safety building. We've only been in it 3 years. We all were there for the ground opening. I think we built a state-of-the-art building. I don't think you've done the legwork to find out what it would take to improve what we have. That's up to you and the department heads. The second thing is this going to be a regional agreement in the future? Similar to the high school?
We're talking about doing it as a district, so yes,
Yes.
very similar to the high
All
school.
right, so
Yes.
it'll be a regional agreement between the parties that are
Be a
involved,
separate entity, just like the
Correct.
high school. is.
just like the high school, which we have a budget every year based on population, based on runs, based
Well,
on.
So that's what has to go into the governance of this
Okay.
structure. So that's, we're not
You're not there
there.
yet.
No.
All right, as a former member of the regional high school, I think you need to find out what there is before you even take the next step.
And there's two choices, that's one of them. We don't have to do theirs. It could be a host, so that's one we think might be the preferable one of the two, but we're nowhere near deciding that either.
Right, and you're nowhere near to sign any kind of an agreement. That sounds like to me, anyway. We have professionals in this room. I don't know each of them by name, but I have to say they've certainly been at my front door, my back door, and has assisted my family. It's a department that's overlooked, and I've said it over and over again. They are your first responders without leaving the building or being on a person, or being on a piece of equipment. And I think you need to look at it. What are you giving up? I know what I think I would be giving up, but that's my opinion, which I'm not going to share. But I think you really need to ask yourself as a committee, what are you giving up to the individuals of this town by not taking a deeper look at what we have before you change it? That's all I have to say. But I thank you for letting me know you're entering an intermunicipal agreement, but it's going to be more like a regional agreement.
We
in the
have two
future.
choices, we haven't decided, but I think the preference would be the regional versus.
Right. But you don't know what the renewal time periods are.
Well,
for
the
that.
IMA is, from what I understand, just to apply for the grant,
Yes.
not for the setup of the rec.
But once you
so-
apply for the grant, are you committed? Did you receive the money? My understanding is you are.
If you apply for the grant, you do receive the money, then you are.
You are committed.
The intermunicipal agreement kind of is that,
That's what it is.
that document.
Thank
Most
you.
of them do have a shelf life.
Hi, so my name is Stephanie. I've been dispatching myself for over 3 years. I wasn't gonna speak,
What's your last name?
Fontaine. I wasn't going to speak, but with the last few speakers, I felt the need to. So I take a lot of pride in knowing Southborough, knowing the residents, knowing the issues, knowing locations, okay? I take a lot of pride in knowing certain things that could escalate at certain addresses. I know that if Elton John's phone number pops up on my 911 screen, that there's a good possibility that his wife just overdosed, but he's gonna lie to me and he's gonna say, no, she didn't take anything. But I'm also gonna know that he's very confrontational with cops. So something like that, I take a lot of pride in knowing that, hey, you know, you guys need to go to this address and, oh, it's so-and-so's house. But just remember, he's confrontational with cops and he doesn't like to admit that his wife has issues, okay? Same thing with people with mental health issues. You know, we have quite a few frequent flyers in town. It's really good that we know these people. We know their behaviors. We know their family members. We know how their family members behave. It's good to know these things because we're able to let our fire department know. We're able to let the police department know, okay? You know, Sergeant Wittes spoke about how we used to have a chief who could have given a crap less about dispatch, and it's the honest to God truth. I came in when he was there. He didn't care. As long as there was a person in that chair, he didn't care what happened, and it wasn't right. I think that our dispatch team now does a fantastic job. I think we do very well working together, working with both departments, working with the DPW, working with local agencies, everything. I think that if you guys don't think that we're doing enough of our job, look more into our communications office, put more money into our communications office. The fire department thinks that we need to have 2 people on at all times. Okay, well, let's do some research in the office and see if that's what we need. Do we need a second full-time dispatcher at all times? Maybe we do, maybe we don't. I think that we're not doing enough studies in our town specifically to see what we could improve if needed to improve versus just saying, hey, let's go regionalize. I don't think that that's the answer. I think it's a good idea to keep it local. You know, we know the town, we know the police department, we know the fire department, we know a lot of the residents. You know, it's just, I think it's best to keep it local. I think that you guys need to do a little bit more research to come in to our communication center. You know, Kyle has invited you guys to come in, see how we operate, see what goes on day to day. I think that would be a good idea if you guys did. Okay, I vote keep it local. I think that would be in better favor for the townspeople and for both the fire department and the police department. Thank you.
Before we go to the next one, is there anyone here that actually supports regionalization? Is everybody on the side of not doing it? You.
All right. Hi, my name is Brittany Remillard. I am a current communications employee. I started with the town in January 2019. I left for about 1.5 years and then I came back, and that just shows you how much of a dedicated, important department this is, that I would leave from where I came from to come back. Okay, so one question I have is if it's hard to staff the department now, it's going to be hard to staff a regional center where people don't want to be regional. Every single dispatcher that I talk to in the area, they don't want to be regional. People that I talk to, I have a very good friend in Franklin. They have a regional center. He said their dispatches, I hate to say horrible, but it's not great. So how are we going to get more people into the center if we can't even get people in the center where it looks appealing? There's nothing, it just seems like there's no pros for the employees in the center, and it's all focused on money, where no one
it's not the money, but it's the money, because that's what we talked about the whole night. Also, if we put an officer on the front desk and then we move dispatchers over to the regional center, now you're taking one more person. Why don't you just take that one person and make it a dispatcher? So you don't want to leave the lobby dark. There have been serious walking calls that I've witnessed, that neighboring towns have witnessed, that require serious action, as in domestics, women running into the lobby, all beaten up after they were tied up and kept in their house and weren't allowed to leave. What's gonna happen when the station's dark? You think they're gonna stand there and hold a phone and talk to someone on dispatch? No, they're gonna try to find somewhere to hide. The first thing that I do is I get them into a locked room where, in case a person's chasing them, they won't have access. And then if there is an altercation in the lobby, who's there? No one's there. Right now, it's great that we have people there, that we have a good mode of communication other than just radios. Like, we have cell phones, we have the interior phones. I just think that we aren't given enough credit for the communication that we have personally among other officers. Another suggestion that I have is with the whole mutual aid issue, there are other surrounding agencies who are in part of these multi-town frequencies, as in one is called Baypern. We could, as the Metro West community, we could make our own frequency, and then that dissolves the whole phone issue. Then you just go over the frequency, just as you would with District 14, when you ask District 14 to, so for us, we assign our own first alarm, we call the mutual aid, and then once we put the fire to a second alarm, then it's transferred over to District 14. We could take the same concept for accidents, for medicals, for serious issues, and then that eliminates the whole time issue to call new departments. Another issue that I have with this whole concept is that the whole time I've been here, so January 2019 to June 2020, November 2021 till now, I have had one class with the fire department to let us know what they expect. Other than that, every single time we mess up, someone comes in to dispatch and they tell us what we did wrong. But it's not relayed to everyone. There have been multiple instances where I've told that I had messed up, which that's okay, everyone messes up, but the other people in dispatch didn't know that that's what we're supposed to be doing. So you can't put us on blast for not doing something right when you haven't made that expectation out everywhere. If you have high standards, supply the training, work with us. Don't just look at us as like, oh, they literally, firefighters tell us that they don't want to have to worry about going home because if there's a mayday, they're going to die. That's pretty brutal to say to your dispatchers who care about you. Like, it's not like we're anti-fire. So why don't we have the fire department put equal energy into dispatch as the police are? Why is it only fallen on the police that police is taking care of the applications, police is taking care of staffing, police is taking care of the whole budget, and then fire's just over here disappointed, but they're not providing any remedies. So just like other people said, we need to look into what we can fix now before we just try to throw it out to a whole new department, because that's ideally what it is. No, the town just doesn't want to deal with it anymore. So then if we have a regional center, then it takes the issues off of the current parties, and then it just puts the issues onto someone else. My last point. Oh, sorry. I think that was my last point. That was my last point. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Blair Sutherland. Excuse me. I live at 139 Parkerville Road. To qualify myself for a moment, if I can, I'm the retired telecommunications director with the state police. I have 20 years experience with that department, and prior to that, I was with the state 911 department for 7 years and on the 911 commission for 25 years. Having said all that to you, I'm going to turn to Joe and just say, I'm sorry I've never met you before.
We've met. Yes, I'm insulted.
I'm sorry, Joe. I'm sorry. See what retirement does to you, though, right?
It's quite all right.
So I have a couple of things I wanted to point out, but I think I'm going to start just by saying, and a couple of people have said it already, to acknowledge the unbelievably fantastic work that dispatchers and telecommunicators do here in Southborough and throughout the Commonwealth. They are the unsung heroes. They are the first responders. And without them, the rest of the machine that has to be in the field, running into the house, doing the things that law enforcement does is impossible. So I throw, as I'm sure the board does as well, I throw my complete support around that profession and the great work that they do. That said, I've looked at the study pretty thoroughly. I think there are some good recommendations that came out of the Collins Center study. I guess I'll start just with my 2 cents and I'll provide a little bit of context. I think given the opportunity that the board may have here, I think it's worth that Southborough continue looking at the options. But in saying that, I want to be clear. In my entire career's experience, I've seen really successful communication centers that have merged together, regional centers, and I've seen centers that, holy mackerel, they've had a lot of trouble. It all comes down to the plan, and it all comes down to the willingness of those who are involved, including working with collective bargaining units and working with the entire cadre of people to make a successful communications center. One size does not fit all. And I'm in no position to say whether the town of Southborough should definitely do this or not. I do want to say, though, that I think it's smart that the town continue to look at what the options may be. I have a ton of experience with the 911 grants and the timelines. I certainly have some appreciation as to why the first step that municipalities have to take is to declare some sort of willingness to work together. I can tell you that I've seen some regional plans fall apart after the towns and the managers in the towns have not done their due diligence. So I applaud you continuing to look at it. I think due diligence is incredibly important here. I would also encourage the continuing discussion with the police chief and the fire chief. Having your public safety leaders continue to be or working with them to ensure that everybody's on the same page is really important as well. I do want to take just a moment and discuss, a subject that I have heard in my career often talked about, and that is the kind of the specter of the dark station. There have been some communities that have chosen to, if you will, go dark after a certain amount of time, and some communities who have chosen to not go dark and still have someone on a desk or in the station to be able to handle either walk-in traffic or do whatever other either emergency or administrative business may be available to them. I've also seen hybrid plans where if a station, I'm going to say, has to be abandoned in a small town, there may be a circumstance arise where your personnel in the station have got to get in the cruiser or get in the apparatus and they got to go. There's technology that's available that can be put at a front door that can be a stopgap measure. That doesn't necessarily have to be even the full-time plan. So I think there are options available. I wanted to address the notion of dark station because that's pretty scary. And in a local town that's used to very personalized, I'm going to say, and fantastic customer service, then with that kind of change, it can be, that can be a difficult pill sometimes to try to choke down. In terms of my experience, in terms of how you staff a 911 center and how you manage to get good dispatchers and keep good staff, well, that's true of a public safety agency as much as it is of any other corporation. Trying to, and again, it all goes back to the plan. If the plan includes a hiring process, if the plan has competitive salaries, if a plan in working with the local chiefs has the right staffing in order to take into account, not just the day-to-day call volume, because frankly, considering day-to-day call volume is easy. There was some discussion about what do we do in an exigent circumstance. We have a flood, we have a storm. Well, an operational plan in a professionally managed regional communication center absolutely can account for that. I'm not saying it's easy, it's real professional management that is needed to think about when you need to try to bring in extra personnel, or what's plan B when there has to be a plan B. I will say that situational awareness in a regional communication center is one of the, and frankly, when you talk about situational awareness, I'm talking about situational awareness from a regional perspective. When a single center is taking information in from a number of communities, that information is resident at one spot and in that communication center and can be, in my opinion, and this comes from experience, much more easily distributed than trying to do call outs when unnecessary on the radio or to relay calls back and forth. That's one of the things that regional centers and regional management brings to the table. But again, it all comes down to, is the municipality and its public safety management serious about looking at regionalization, and are the partners, the other municipalities that are interested in doing it, are they on enough of a serious page to say we're ready to take a step forward? So I guess, it comes back to, right, it's all about the plan, and it's all about the vetting, not only discussions within the board and within the public safety professionals, it's taking into account all kinds of things that have to be considered when you're doing a plan like this, like policy and procedure, like collective bargaining, if that's going to be an issue, whether you're going to consolidate computer-aided dispatch systems, whether you're going to want to move everybody onto the same radio system. And by the way, these things all don't have to happen at once. This can happen in an incremental way. Perhaps the last thing I'll say is just, I'm looking over Joe relative to the 911 program. In my entire time with the state, I've never known the 911 program to ever cut funding from any, never mind regional center, even from municipalities. Now, that said, there have been and likely will continue to be some reduction in some grant funding to, I'm going to say, to the standalone PSAPs. The state has had a program for years to try to encourage municipalities to regionalize. Regionalization isn't for everybody, but I will leave you just sort of with this. Here in Massachusetts, I understand that this is, I'm about to be blasphemous here. Here in Massachusetts, we have a history of doing things on a local control basis, and that works out for us here in the state fantastically. There has been, though, opportunities for school districts to look at regionalize, for other kinds of regionalization that have been successful. In other parts of the country where local control doesn't operate that way, there are large, I'm going to say some of them are enormous, regional communication centers that run like clockwork. That's a generalized statement. not every center, runs like a perfect well-oiled machine, but there are models that can be followed both here in state and elsewhere that can help perhaps inform not just Southborough, but Southborough's partners, since you guys can't do it by yourselves, to help inform the process as to what may make sense and how to continue to look at it. So my 2 cents is I would encourage the town to continue to look at it, whether it's time to do paperwork or not, or whether more time is needed in order to figure it out. I guess that's up to the board to decide. But thank you.
Can I just make sure I got your name right? Wayne?
It's Blair Sutherland.
Everyone knows him on Halloween.
Thank you, Gary.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Bath.
Sure, I was gonna say anything, but I figured might as well. Andrew Pfaff, 50 Oak Hill, Chair of Advisory, but speaking on as an individual. I think one question I need before I provide any comment. So if we moved forward with an IMA or whatever the letter of intent from the town administrator process is, if we apply for a grant, that grant isn't funded in its entirety, could we back out? If we ask for $10 million, the state says you get $50, we're then on the hook for $9 million, is that the case? Or not?
In terms, so if you're, well, I'll use that example, you put in for 10 million, you only get $50.
Yeah.
Then that's all that's funded for your project. It depends on if you want to move forward with paying the 10 million yourself, or if you can parse it out for the next grant.
But do we have to move forward with regionalization of that?
If you have a signed IMA, more than likely, yes.
Okay. But if we do the town
And if you
administrator
do
letter
the
thing,
letter of intent, then it's not a signed IMA. So the letter of attestation says that you're willing to work together.
okay.
Why would the IMA have it out if you get $50 out of 10 million?
I can't speak to that. I don't.
I mean,
The IMA is
seriously.
something that you
So-
and your district or your
So-
communities would have. to
That's probably
work
not a
out.
realistic example, but I mean, I get.
You know, like,
But you would think that there would be a way if you didn't get, I don't think we want to leave here tonight with everybody thinking that money was the emphasis, because it was not. Chief Achilles is, and Chief Moore are sincerely worried about the system we have in place right now. They don't think it is strong enough and would therefore like to shore it up one way or the other. Money was never the impetus for this at all. Yes, money's always part of everything, but it's not the impetus for this. But if we,
that's a risk.
yeah, okay, so.
That was my
Yeah,
concern.
So
right?
I
So,
would think in the IME you'd have something in there,
We could write language in there that says if we don't get. this
really, that if you
amount,
get,
then,
10% of the asking for, you got.
correct.
Rethink it.
Because I think if it's binding, we're not there yet, I don't think, in my opinion, to bind ourselves to this. But if it's non-binding in terms of if we don't get what we asked for, I think it's worth going forward. But now that there's a possibility we could exit, I think that we could move forward. So this is what I want to say. I wanted to first say that I am by no means an expert on this topic, but I have been following this closely and have formulated some thoughts on the topic. Fortunately, I was able to tour the rec facility in Foxborough, and I was very impressed with what I saw. As a technology professional, I thought the infrastructure, redundancy, facility, dedication of the staff there was awesome. The ability to immediately pop up the information from your phones, medical ID information, data if there's a car crash from the vehicle to know what seats people were in, whether the airbags were deployed and rolled over, whether or not the temperature alarm went off in the car, there's a fire. It was very impressive. Immediately after coming back from Foxborough, I toured the town's dispatch center. And while it is staffed by amazing and dedicated dispatcher, the technology stack and the infrastructure just pales in comparison. We don't have the same functionality. We don't have redundancy. We don't have the same technology. We just can't. This town simply cannot afford nor should try to keep up with a facility like that. It makes wise financial and practical sense to look at this further. While we could staff the local dispatch with 2 or 3 people, we still would have a gap in our ability to have dedicated oversight of the team with someone that is an expert at running dispatch. Both the chiefs do a great job at, but the knowledge and specific dedication that I saw from the management staff in Foxborough and their commitment to accreditation, national best practices, training programs, their training room was nicer than an entire dispatch center. It was intensive, the fact of what they did for the employees, and here's some of the dispatchers talking about the lack of training. It was kind of night and day. I do suggest, after knowing that we maybe could get it out, depending on how we look for it, that we move forward with the application, depending on if it's IMA or a letter of intent. And wait to hear back from the state on what funding is available, and then determine if the funding is adequate to move forward. But regardless, I am in favor of always having a station officer or civilian desk person on staff so that our station is not dark. There has other towns that have done this in the past, and there's still an overall cost savings and an improvement in coverage. So, thank you.
I'd like to just clarify, I'm sorry, it's been a long day. If you don't spend, if you're awarded grant money and you don't spend it.
Correct.
You can either extend the grant for another year, or hey, we weren't where we're at, we're gonna extend it.
Okay.
Or you can give the money.
Okay, that's what that.
But the minute you spend
That makes
that
sense.
money,
Then you're on.
Right.
you're on. Either it's, hey, we can't move forward, so we spent $500, here's $500 back, we're not doing it.
We'll send them the $50 right back.
Preferably iTunes.
Thank you very much.
I'm not from town, as I already mentioned, and I promise I'll be brief.
You gotta introduce yourself.
Yes, ma'am. My name is Kylie Davis. I am the president of Hopkinton Dispatch Union. I just wanted to speak it in terms of, they talked about this technology and being able to narrow it in. And I'm going to speak as an outsider with the potential of coming into this rec center and potentially dispatching for your town. I've been with Hopkinton for 5 years, and there are still parts of town that I have no idea where they exist. Now, I do details on the road. I've had ride-alongs. I've been with the town for 5 years, and there's still parts of town that if a older gentleman were to call in and say, I'm at Echo Lake on the side where, this rock is, I'm not going to know where that is. So the big part of, yes, there is an extensive amount of technology that comes with 911. If your residents are calling in on a 911 line. What is failed to be mentioned in this study is how many phone calls the residents place to just the department. Now, here's a big thing, and it's something to take very seriously. I'm a new dispatcher in this rec center, and I'm assigned Southborough and Grafton. Grafton Fire, Southborough Police. And your resident calls in not on a 911 line, and they're saying, I'm at this place, and instead of giving me a street name because they grew up in town, this is what it was always called. And it's an emergency and they can only recall the landmark. It's not specific enough for somebody who's from out of town. And while it's a great idea to say that you'll give virtual ride-alongs to out-of-town dispatchers who are coming into this new rec center so that they can have a better understanding of your town. It's taken me 5 years to just know Hopkinton, and I don't know it in its full capacity. And each community is growing. But like I said, if somebody's calling in on a landline, I can't see where they are on a map. I can't tell you what street they're close to. I can't tell you if their airbag's deployed or how fast they're traveling. That is all stuff you're given when somebody's car calls 911 on their behalf, or somebody calls in with their cell phone. So while the study states, they give all these numbers on how many calls each one of our departments receives every year, what I found was lacking was how many calls just the business line for that station gets, because it's double the amount, if not triple the amount of 911 calls. So without having somebody with a lack of knowledge or with knowledge of your town picking up your phone lines, it's going to change how something is dispatch, just mutual aid or just basic response. So
Can I
that's,
ask you a question?
yes, ma'am.
Can I ask you a question? So are you suggesting then, because anybody that may be hired through dispatch may not necessarily live in Southborough.
Mhm.
So would you not face the same challenges that you're talking about not understanding Southborough and not knowing Southborough if somebody from, say, Worcester came and was dispatching here? It's going to take time to understand all those things. I mean, is that a fair statement?
That's a fair statement, and I would not dispute that. However, so I don't live in Hopkinton.
Yep.
I grew up in Milford.
Yep.
I had to learn the town of Hopkinton.
Yep.
From the start. However, I was learning one town. From my base knowledge of some of these centers, your dispatcher is not designated to a town like they are right now. So I might work. So right now I work exclusively for Hopkinton, and I'm lucky that I have another dispatcher with me. And we do have a director who runs our communications department. I'm not here to speak about how that functions, but it functions well. But if I'm a dispatcher coming into a rec center, from my understanding is I would not be assigned to Hopkinton. I would be expected to rotate amongst the departments that are in play. And police and fire for every department does not function the same as Hopkinton. I can tell you right now, if I came over to Southborough tomorrow to dispatch, well, I have knowledge and training. It's not going to be the way they would expect it to happen. And that's a big concern with these centers is police and fire, they run a certain way, they like to function a certain way, they have expectations. Now you have people who don't understand the expectations for all these different towns. You don't have the knowledge. I hate to say it's not always the best because you're new every day and it takes triple the amount of time to learn.
Fair enough.
Can I just ask? Sorry. So when you say calls coming in through the business line or non-911 phone, you're talking about a landline calling 911 or a cell phone calling the 508 whatever number to get through to the business line.
Correct.
That's what you're referring to? Okay,
Correct.
I just wanted to.
You can, yes, yeah.
Okay.
So like the business line, then the line that's assigned to the police or fire station directly versus the 911 PSAP, because that comes with all that mapping and equipment and extra knowledge, which is pulled from technology.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We've got someone coming over. Chief, you want to come back on?
I'm just gonna look. You can't leave yet.
Hi, Ms. Wittes. Can you hear us?
Hello?
Now we can hear you.
Hi, thank you. I just really quickly wanted to point out.
Can you introduce yourself?
Oh, hi, I'm sorry. This is Sherry Wittes, 32 Bigelow Road. The report, I'm sorry, I'll reference its actual title. The report that everyone keeps referencing, I should have got that beforehand. I'm sorry, I can't find it. About regional dispatch. That's for all the towns, 7 towns, not just the 4 towns that we're discussing now. So don't you think that we should probably revise that report to just reflect all the numbers based on the 4 towns and how that's going to affect us? Because if the minimum staffing for 7 towns was
It has been. That's why, if you were listening 2 minutes ago, we talked about the addendum. So there is an addendum to the report that does reflect the reduction from 7 to 4.
Okay, does that talk about the minimum staffing for dispatchers?
Yes.
It did? Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't read the full report. However, I did note that there is a draft agreement in there which does referencing how the agreement would be renewed. It would be renewed every 5 years, and then for a limit of 25 years unless renewed by all the other towns. That was in the report to answer someone's previous question. So I just think maybe we should all read the report again before we make any big decisions. Thank you.
Ms. Wittes, that actually was a template agreement, so we could actually make that anything we need, we can agree to. That was a suggestion, as a starting point for it. But, we can, again, depending on the town's agreement, that can be any number that we choose.
Yes, I referenced that. I guess I just thought when that question was asked, nobody even called out that answer. Thank you. Good night.
Oh, Dave Mehta, Southborough Police. I work as a dispatcher there. 20 plus years. I'm vested, born and raised here. I remember when the police department was behind us, downstairs on the first floor. I actually broke that window playing basketball. I wanted to tell you that.
Did you pay for it?
Thank you.
Did you
I was
pay
wondering
for
which
it?
one.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I paid for it. So we've heard a lot, regional, not regional, you know, the plan is here. We're working here. We function, 4 of us. We had 5, but she moved on to greener pastures. A lot of people that we hire don't want to do this job by themselves. They want to do 2. I can tell you I can multitask. I can tell you I lock up. Then I multitask. But you have to find an individual that can multitask, do the fire, do the police, do the person that comes in for an LTC application, help the person that needs CPR over the phone. There was a question about your mutual aid. We have a program in our radio system that I can monitor, and I can even talk to multiple towns at the same time. Unfortunately, that's not the practice we do. When we put out a call, it's to us singularly. Then we use the telephone to call the departments, which I'm not going to beat a dead horse, but that might need to be looked at. To answer your question thoroughly, sir, I'm a big fan of doing that. 24/7 or 24/7. That's one person, all working for the town of Southborough, fielding all sorts of calls. We work for the DPW, the police department, the fire department, the animal control officer. We've now been taking calls from the Mass Pike along with 495. So I think for one person, 8 hours a day, and try to bang out 16 hours, you know why I listen to loud music? It's to flush my brain when I leave the building. You know, it's a good job. I love it. I have been doing it for 22 years. I might be shy on that 22, that last year, but it's a long time. And I can talk in Tourette's. I can talk 3-4 times. If you need it, I'll repeat as many times as you want. You gotta find that individual. That's tough. But you gotta have 2 people running at the same time. Our equipment is great. Our computers are great. We all know computers last for as long as you don't break them, but they've never been updated. We haven't had one update on the radio system. You can bang, I can probably find 2 addresses for 17 Common Street in our computer system because it's never been updated from our old computer system when we were still at 19 Main Street. They merged it all together and we got doubles. That's never been fixed. They've been sitting there. I can pick up people that are moved out of town, not because they haven't told us, it's because they're in the computer 3 or 4 times because of that switchover. There's an update that could correct all that stuff. Our radio system, not the state of the art, but it's good. We don't use it to its full capacity. Our training, it's the best that the state can offer. We all do EMD. It's a rhythm. I can't dance a step, but I'll tell you what I can do. I can talk on the telephone. I can talk on 911 and EMD on the same time. All 4 of us can. I'll say all 4 of us again. That's 3 shifts, 4 people, 24/7, 7 days a week. That's a lot. This profession has a burnout rate that's astronomical. It changes every week from people quitting meltdowns, not wanting to do it anymore. Money's as much as you make. I'll never cry that I make too much money. I'll never cry that I don't make enough. I like what I'm doing. Any questions for me? I mean, anything?
Speak to regionalization. You told us about local. So what do you think about the proposal to possibly regionalize the dispatch?
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword. I really don't care about anybody other than within the town of Southborough. If I need to help a surrounding town, I will give them 100%, 100% of the time. But I only worry about Southborough. Regionalization, I hear two awful stories. You never get to the town that you're from. Don't care, because when I'm there, I'm gonna have to work for all of them. If it's 4 towns, I have to work for all 4 towns. Now, I know how taxing I can tell you that working for one town is. I am an old dog, but I do have some new tricks. I don't want to learn about 3 other towns because of that simple thing. You know where Fitzgerald's Market is? You know where Fitzy's is? You know where the T station is? I don't know where they are in other towns. Every town has a Fitzy's. Every town has an MBTA station. So I don't want to go regional. But hey, if that's the choice, then you have to deal with it. It's still the job in a different location. I won't be happy. And honestly, I only got like 2 more years left, 3 more years left. Mr. A couple answer guy, I'll be gone. Okay. All right, I'll tell you exactly what you want to hear and elaborate when I can. You might not like my answer, but I'll tell you straight out. And no, I don't want to go regional. And like I said, I do care about other communities, but I focus Southborough, and then secondary goes to the other sides. Anything else, ladies and gentlemen?
Good, thank you.
And I just want to make sure that
Mhm.
we fully recognize,
Oh, I
and I
agree.
think a year ago, when we were asked to do the fifth dispatcher and add it into the next fiscal year, like, we want to support you,
Oh,
right?
without a
And-
doubt, I agree.
And the fact that you guys, the 4 of you, are running a 24/7 operation, it blows my mind. And, I think this town owes you a lot of
Thank
thanks
you.
for that. And I know it's hard, and I know that, we can't seem to get ahead, and, as soon as we get the 5th one, it's not staying. So,
We'll get there.
I think we all recognize that you need help, and, I appreciate you coming tonight.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for letting me talk. Any questions?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Any questions? Sir?
So just give your perspective on, everyone that has come that has had concerns about going regional also seems to support the idea that if we don't do that, we should staff up so that we have 2 dispatchers. And then you also mentioned Hopkinton as a full-time communications person, so that police, fire don't have to, they can focus on police and fire. So, and this isn't just about money, it's just thinking through, okay, so let's say we made a decision, that's what we're gonna do. And then we're also gonna take on all of the paying for all the capital to maintain fully, state of the art. Even if we thought about it, crunched all the numbers, town meeting appropriated the money, and then we posted all these jobs, would we be able to really fill them? Right?
Doesn't sound like
Because
it.
for,
If you can't
for-
get the 5th
it's
one,
a,
we're gonna
yeah,
get the
if
other
there's,
one.
so that.
That's why I threw that out there.
So what I'm hearing is there's also some of these same, staffing problems in the regional centers, but it seems like at least there you've got, not just the problem of one dispatcher.
The odds are against you, honestly. You have one town, one dispatcher, 8 hours a day. You
That's
have
right,
a
I feel the
regional
odds are against us now.
of 3 or 4 towns. If you have a minimum of 2, like Sergeant would have said, you're now at a half. Now existing, you've got that one guy, which is, your average is better here in Southborough. Honestly, because what is it, 6? You said this mandatory, is the maximum.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna name names, not to say where. They don't have the bodies. They don't. They run 3. If you run 3, you have 1.5. You have 1.5. I know that this is my 3rd day on. There's been 4 applications so far for the 5th dispatcher. So it's out there. We use, Kyle should be able to explain what ones we use, but we put the applications out. And was it, I'm not even gonna tell you that I know the name of the company, because with a Z, Solo, Zulu, Zippo, I don't know, but it's on that, Zillow, all right? Or one of those hiring websites. So we're out there. I don't know, Kyle, I'm tired. But it's out there for people to come here.
Yeah.
It's just that nobody wants to work by themselves. I mean, you've got a big room, right?
That's one of the point where the odds are against us in the current system, right?
Yeah, but you still get that one guy versus 1 or a half on a regional center. When that storm comes in, we prepare to have 2 people on, we know when clement weather's gonna come. With that storm that came through, when the house burnt on that street, well, we had 2 people covering through that and it ran smoother. When you see it coming, we prepare for it. Unfortunately, you can't prepare for all of it. And 2 with us works great. We work good with 1. You want great or you want good? Conceive consent.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Y'all have a good night.
So, Kyle, you want to come up?
Yeah, I do. Kyle, I just wanted to touch first, and I guess I'll be last.
I just wanted to touch on your staffing levels. I know you guys run with 4. I'm Kylie Davis. I just wanted to touch on your staffing levels as a department that runs similar numbers to Southborough. So we, like I said, run 2 per shift. We have a communications director. We have 8 full-time dispatchers. That's double the amount, obviously, because we run with 2. And we have 6 part-timers. So, and we don't have a hard time maintaining staffing because people aren't being forced in on doubles every day. They're not necessarily tired of the job because it is a stressful job. So if you can get up to an appropriate staffing on just a in-house level, it does make a world of difference as far as keeping people once you do find those good candidates. And that's, I mean, we have double the amount of staffing, but we don't have the issue of maintaining people. That's not to say that people don't leave, but we're not we don't put ourselves in a terrible condition when that does happen.
Thank you.
Everyone, Kyle DeVincent, union president here in Southborough, also a resident. Most of my stuff has already been touched on, such as the whole Western Mass thing that's been covered. Just talking about recruitment process and what happens. I want to say not half the police department, but pretty close to half the police department has been a dispatcher in Southborough. Gets, I wouldn't necessarily call it a promotion, but they become a patrol officer after becoming a dispatcher. So when you look at the figures and you say, oh, another posting for a dispatcher, well, why did it happen? So-and-so became a police officer, or so-and-so went here, whatever the case may be. I think that needs to be taken into consideration when you're, talking about why we can't fill them. Another reason, low pay. I think that's been kind of rectified through our last contract. I think we're kind of in the middle now. I'll leave it at that. Also, people leaving again, it's been touched on by other people that have come up here, but previous leadership, didn't want to work there. I take pride in working in Southborough. 5th generation. My family's been in town since 1912. So there is some passion behind it. When we're talking about, technology and everything, we have the same technology they're talking about with the cars and everything like that. It's called Rapid SOS. We got it. It's a free program. You sign up, no issues. We're also wireless direct, meaning cell phone calls come directly to us. Same with the Mass Pike, same with 495. We get the calls. If there's a medical aid or an accident, we can dispatch immediately. If not, DMV, boom, send it off to state police. No issues there. When we're talking about regional sites of a failure, Essex Regional, I don't need to go in it. Everyone has cell phones. Just Google Essex Regional. You'll find millions of articles. I just did it myself. They tried to get Ipswich to just join. They said no. It was going to be free, correct? We can't charge them.
Yes, sir.
It's going to be free. They said no. They're going to staff their dispatch. When we look at a more local department, look at Hopedale. Hopedale was made many promises to go regional. They decided to go regional. Didn't work out. Whatever promises were broken, didn't work out. They said, we're hiring our dispatchers back. That's what they did. Hopedale now has dispatchers. What the state has done has, they've not given them their computers back. So I guess technically they are a regional. They have a ring down system, it's called. So Upton answers their phone and they just get transferred to Hopedale. And Hopedale has their dispatchers because they were not satisfied with that level of service. When we talk about minimum staffing, I can tell you Wachusett Regional is another regional center. 4 towns, they're always at minimum staffing. 2 guys, 4 towns. I don't think I need to come up here and hound all this. It's been covered, but I'm just letting you guys know that. When it comes to, mutual aid and thing like that, yes, we are part of District 14. We all have scanners, we all listen. Mike Cunningham touched on it before. If we hear something, we're dispatching immediately. Any good dispatcher's got the scanner on. At one point, we had automatic aid with Westboro. I think it was a technology thing. It might have been before Chief Achilles was here, but when we struck the first alarm, Westboro was already en route. There was some sort of alert that Southborough went to Westboro. Again, like I said, it might have been before Chief Achilles, but now it's stopped. There are technology in place to, facilitate all this, and we need to really look at that. And again, I'll say it again. You guys, as a board of selectmen, you need to come and tour the dispatch center. Not just a tour coming in, popping your head in, saying, oh, what's this screen, what's this? No, it's sitting there. And I will give credit to Lisa. When this first started, she's the only one who did come in, and she sat with me for a few hours to see what actually goes on. Other members of the board, you really need to do that. Like I said, I'm not that hard to get a hold of. If people have my number, email, I'm in town, It's easy. When we're talking about supervisors and things like that in the comm center, I don't know if you guys know that, but recently through the previous contract, we created a lead dispatcher position. I was given that. So now this is relatively new. It's something that everyone wanted, and we're getting it off, and I think it's working out great. You guys, any questions?
Just say thank you, Karen. Everything that you do.
No, thank you. Again, it's not something that I want to see go regional. I think we need to really look at our department, look at our community, and provide that service to the residents. Even when Brittany's talking, her firsthand experience, I've had them too, and I've mentioned them here last time, but it happens. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to touch on your subject. And I'd like to ask this gentleman. if you have a need for 2 dispatchers in Southwood, you have a need for 2 dispatchers in Hopkinton, you have a need for 2 dispatchers in Ashland, and you're only proposing to have, and what's the other community, Westboro?
It's not Ashland, it's Westboro, Grafton,
Yeah.
Hopkinton.
Yeah, all those, you know, I'm sorry, people can try to argue with it, but they never convince me. You've got to have, you know, depending on the site, you've got to have 2 people, even in this nice little town, you've got to have 2 people. But if you're gonna have 2 here and 2 there and 2 there, and you're only proposing to have a maximum of 5, it's not gonna work.
I just want to clarify.
Yeah, the state 911 department is not proposing.
Yeah.
anything.
No.
That's
State
a
911
study,
department.
that's an independent study. The state 911 department is not proposed, this is a proposed center. I couldn't speak to staffing levels.
Yeah.
That's done by the independent study of the Collins Center.
Well, in your addendum report or whatever, what does it say for the staffing levels? Minimum 2.
So this is what the suggestion came back in the study. It's not anything that we've agreed to. And I think, and I don't want to speak for the chief, but the reason why we're concerned about having 1 in Southborough is that if something happens, there is no backup, right? So that doesn't necessarily translate though to at any given time for 4 towns, you need 2 per town. So it's to mitigate your risk when more than one thing's going on at a time. It doesn't correlate to needing 2 per town in a region.
Let me tell you something about your existing situation with 1 dispatcher in there. Don't make no bones about it. The previous police chief did not like dispatchers. He didn't have, you know, he really didn't care about.
We've heard that tonight, so that's.
Okay, but let me finish. So now you've got this state of the art. And I take it, I'd like to know from the finance gentleman there, what he thinks we lack in technology. But you've got, in the old building, when you worked there with 1 dispatcher, you had the break room off where the officers, usually there was someone in there, okay? I know from my own experience, when I'd get a 911 call, I'd be getting the information and there'd be a police sergeant that would be over my shoulder and he would transmit what was needed to his guys and then leave, you know, he'd bail you out if, you know, getting 2, 3, 4 calls at once. Now, with the new situation, I visited there twice. There's 1 person in there. There's no access. I don't know if it's denied or whatnot, but there's no fire personnel there, or no police personnel that are in that immediate area at any given time, you know. Poor Dave, but drop dead. Or the night guy.
We hope that doesn't
He could
happen.
drop dead.
That wouldn't be good.
And until the call started coming in and no one, 911 call, they, you know, after you don't answer it after, I don't know how many, they transfer it to Hopkinton, okay? But whoever the 1 single dispatcher in there, he died, you know? And you never know it until
next morning.
The reason we're here tonight is because both the chiefs have said to us, they think the status quo is unacceptable. So then the question
Say
is,
what?
the status quo is unacceptable. They both believe that what we've got with the 1 dispatcher is not appropriate. So the question is, do we shore it up locally? Or do we do this regionalization approach? That's what we're trying to decide. I don't think anyone here is advocating for the 1 dispatcher per shift at all. So we're looking at what's the best way to fix this problem. locally or regionalization. So we're trying to debate the pros and cons of each.
Okay, well, I strongly urge you to stay local.
Thank you very much. Okay. So, long night. So we've heard a lot tonight. We either need to decide to quote Mr. Stivers from recently, sleep on this, right? We'll talk about it again, or tonight, decide what we think we should do as a next step. Knowing the timing that Joe has outlined to us tonight as far as spring period. So why don't we discuss that piece of it?
Can we just review the timeline piece of it? Because I
Why
have
don't we
a
have-
January date and a March date.
Come on up, Chief.
Thank you. And I thought all the comments were appropriate from the public. And I respect their positions. It may come across that the fire department's not really happy with dispatch, and that's not the case. So I appreciate the candor and the honesty of everybody that spoke, even from other towns. So it's important that we do something. My recommendations: don't decide tonight. The timeline is that, there's a meeting, a grant workshop in January that I would hate to not have any decision in December, because I think the other towns, if they are continuing to move forward, it would be unfair for us to go, keep on going, we're not sure what we're going to do. I will speak to the representatives from each of the communities that were on this working group, and tomorrow, just to know how this went tonight. And I think that not sleep on it, but just think about what you think is the best approach. I believe Chief Newell and I believe that the citizens deserve better. I think the police and fire deserve better. I think the dispatchers that work here deserve better. So whatever we do, we have to commit to it. And I would hate, I don't want to make this a 2-year or 5-year process. Not as short as dispatcher made it, but I have a timeline too. And I would hate to see this drag out, because we need some substantial remedies to strengthen it and make it more reliable and more appropriate, again. So if it's up to you, I would think that maybe if there's a meeting in the beginning of after Thanksgiving, but in the beginning of December, be able to let us know what you would like us to do, both Chief Newell and I. We will accept your decisions, but at some point we need to work on this. And I would hate to go into the budget season knowing that we're not going to do regionalization, but we don't have any plan for strengthening our own dispatch, because next year we're here at the same time talking about the same stuff. And I don't think that's fair or appropriate for the community or dispatchers or the police department.
But let's reiterate the timeline. So you got to March 3rd or so to actually submit the grant request, and either will include an interview, an IMA with it, or a soft letter from the 4 towns, which would probably result in less money than the IMA. So that's kind of it. Or we wait a year. So you do it. So March 23, March 24, right? The thing that troubles me most about everything I've heard tonight is one thing specific that the young lady from Hopkinton and Mr. Wittes told us, which is it doesn't sound like necessarily the other, at least 2 of the towns are as far along as we are. So I think we've got to end up the process tonight to at least see where they stand. And it may be Mr. Purple needs to start reaching out to his counterparts in towns. So we really understand. I mean, she said that the select board is not, doesn't know anything about this, and then Mr. Wittes said the dispatchers in Grafton know nothing about this. Yeah. So.
Which changes the
Well, just-
economics, potentially.
Also on the timeline, if by March, you would need to either submit an IME or not. You can't just, you would need to get agreement from
Correct.
3 other towns. That would take a long time.
Four different people.
But I mean, that's why this
this.
model looked like it was pretty fleshed out already.
And that's
Some-
why the-
Some of the standard.
And that's why the
questions were
process
answered
is,
in there.
you can't submit a grant without knowing what your budget is, what your needs are.
Yeah.
So there's no way would I agree to trying to work and submit a grant in February, March. It doesn't make sense because I think it would only be fair if we're gonna move this level with the other communities to know earlier than later, what are the priorities?
Yeah.
What are the grant requests? You can't just put in a blanket request, you want $5 million. It has to be for specific things. So to be fair to the other communities, and to the dispatcher from Hopkins, I don't know what their chief or their departments has shared. I don't know what the Grafton community has shared with their dispatchers. I can only tell you that I reached out to all representatives of all the communities and we were told that they're all committed to moving forward. I know the Hopkins Board of Selectmen took the same position as you. I don't know if that's been communicated or not or how. But I can just tell you that I would not bring this to you and Chief Newell wouldn't bring it to you tonight or last month if we didn't get a commitment that everybody's still trying to move forward. But again, I think at some point we have to decide what this is for everybody's sake. And mostly for the public, because the public are the ones that call 911 and move us out and get us moving. So
But you said earlier, and correct me if I'm wrong, that if we aren't going to submit for this grant cycle, you would hate to see us go through a whole nother year with nothing done locally. Okay, but then I thought you said a minute ago, you don't see how we're going to get this done this February or March.
no, I meant that if you requested us, it made no decision till February or March and go, oh, you have March to submit your grant. I will not do that because there's no way we could prepare an appropriate grant with less time, with a deadline saying that you have to figure everything out in less time. We need more, if we're gonna move forward with this, we need to know and have as much time to prepare for that grant.
So.
Does that make sense?
Okay, what's specific, because the grants could cover things like acquiring a building.
Yeah.
But then, so
But
what
you gotta
would,
know what building you're gonna acquire.
okay, so that's where I was going at. So if let's say you were in a position where you were submitting an application for a grant in March, what would it be for more consultants to get?
No.
Could it be a director to
Okay, all
start
right.
moving the process of director?
Okay.
I think you said that's one of the things that would
Correct.
qualify, a director to start moving it forward, similar to what
Okay.
Foxborough did.
All right.
They brought in the guy that
That's
applied
right.
for our
Okay.
grant. I can't think of his name and I apologize.
But I'm saying that
Listening, but
any appropriate grant that I've ever done is not done close to the deadline.
Last minute.
yeah.
And I think it would only be fair to all parties involved that if we're gonna do this, we need to work on the grant earlier than later. If the decision is, chief, both chiefs, this is not something we can support, we're not gonna do this, we're gonna commit to strengthening our own dispatch, then we need to know that too. And I would like to, I'm supposed to submit a budget next week.
That's right.
So I think it would be only fair for all parties, including our mutual aid partners, that we have some direction, one way or the other.
So,
But I think it's key too, Kathy, if Mark could check with his counterparts and Chief, you check with yours as well and kind of get a better read of
No,
where we're
to
at
me,
as
that's
well.
crucial as
Yeah.
far as a critical path here. I think we really got to make sure our counterparts,
Yeah.
the other towns,
Well,
know where they are.
But you also have to realize that, and I appreciate this, and I think this is important we do this. But if we're not gonna do an IMA if not all four towns. I mean, we're not gonna enter into an IMA with 3 other towns if not everybody's involved, ready to do it.
Which
So-
could be the forcing mechanism here. I mean, it seems to me,
So-
as long as we keep our options open, you can do that by pursuing the IMA with the other 3 towns. and seeing if we can find a deal that everybody seems to be general.
Because if the other three towns or any of them say, great, but we're not doing the IMA, then that answers the question, right?
Yep.
I mean, we'll do, I think it's due diligence that we reach out again to the communities. But I think they also need to know what we're doing.
Right.
I think this is Mr. Purple job to.
Andrew has a question.
Yeah, just another timing consideration. So it sounds like you're looking for us to make a decision about being further committed, and then if we are, then IMA versus letter of attestation. IMA is a higher level of commitment, more money. But it is, in terms of what you could apply for to put in a grant in March. It seems like the benefit of the letter of attestation is it's just a letter. It's pretty simple. And that the IMA, now you have, just from my experience so far, everything that involves intermunicipal seems to be more complicated and slower. And that's the thing. It's not just submit as like file an IMA or submit one. You have 4 different towns. There is a very good head start, but it could get kind of slow.
But it's a good test of people's serious intent.
Yeah.
And if you try to proceed down the IMA track and figure out that, whoops, two communities aren't interested, then you have the option of dropping back to the letter of attestation if people would be interested in that. Because I think that allows us to have a lot more detail about exactly what the structure would be, what it would cost, what the financial impact on each community would be. We can then compare that against the additional staffing locally and get a better picture of the options there. And also, again, I think that it's useful to keep the Foxborough or other rec option on the table to say, what would that imply here? What would the cost of that be as well? I mean, that's a good part of it.
And I caution that, and based on the group that spoke tonight, I think that doesn't solve the issue of not wanting to go to try to keep it local.
Correct.
So I just, and I'll leave it at that. I just think it gets very, I don't want to make it more complicated.
I certainly understand that. On the other hand, I think that this is a pretty important decision. It really is a long-term choice here in a lot of ways. At least we invest locally, and given the technology investment there, I think we're sort of committed to that for at least the next technology cycle, if you will, here. So that might be 5 to 10 years or so. So it seems to me that looking at all the options, even though each one has pluses and minuses, there's no perfect option that I see on the table here. But having a complete picture, at least I personally would find helpful to have at least a reasonable view of as we are pursuing the IMA to see if our other towns are equally interested in that or not.
Right now, I can tell you that as far as I've been informed, the other 3 communities are not interested in a different rec.
I understand that. But we don't
Joe,
know.
the letter of attestation still has to be pretty specific though, as far as what we are asking for. We can't just say we want X amount of dollars. We may not have an IMA, but we still got to be very specific about what we're asking for, right?
So the letter of attestation basically is, and there's if you go onto the State Now website right now under information for call centers into the FY23 grant, the very end is a template for a letter of attestation. And all the letter of attestation is basically the town manager from town A saying to the executive director of the State Now department that they are willing or interested in exploring either joining an existing rec or in your case, forming a new rec. There's no kind of, to do that, we'll need X amount of dollars, because that's what's going to come in your grant application.
Okay.
Okay, just to be clear. So I get that part as far, okay, so in the grant application that goes with the letter of attestation,
yes,
we still are going to be asking for specific things.
Yes, you still will be
So
now
we still
asking
have,
for.
4 towns have to agree to what that is.
Yes.
So I mean, there's 4 select boards here, 4 town councils. There's a lot of work to be done here, I think, for either submission.
Right, yep. Which is why we need to do it quickly here. Seriously.
And so then if there were 4 towns just had a letter of attestation on an IMA, and the grant was for, the natural first step was to have an executive director. That just seems odd to, you haven't made the decision to go and actually form an IMA yet, but you want to hire a person who's going to try to recruit people to work for a new district, but you haven't even really committed to the new district yet.
Which is why the IMA sounds to me like a better choice as a first step, because again, you're better positioned for the grant higher in the priority structure, and you've got to do most of the rest of the work anyway, sounds like.
Is there anyone that, as of this moment, does not want to at least go to the next step as far as pursuing the possibility of regionalization? Has anyone been persuaded tonight that they'd rather stay locally? Are we still on the path that we want to look at all options here, including regionalization?
I still am, just because again, like the point I made earlier, and I think I made this at the last time. I'm curious what other people think about it, even if we were to significantly increase the budget. And there would be the money, would we be able to hire people we need and then have good retention so that we long-term Southborough could build? It seems unclear to me.
Yeah, young lady from Hopkinton said that they've had that experience, and given that there is adequate staffing, they've had success with staffing.
But then 2 full-time and a lot of part-time and a full-time communication. So it actually would be even more than that.
More resource commitment, right? But that's the way it could be done potentially, so.
Well, okay.
But again,
speak on that? This question?
Hi, everybody.
Reintroduce. Apparently someone's had their hand up before you. You want to come on up?
Do you mind if I just go first?
Mr. Deniking, just to answer your question, I think under new leadership, the new role of me that I've been put into as a lead dispatcher and, you know, expanding with everything, I don't think you're gonna have that problem.
Because you think with 2 people there, it's going to be a better job? And
yes.
because that's what young lady from Hopkins
Absolutely.
thinks that.
Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely.
It's a lot
And
different job than one.
And we, like I said, rectified the pay scale, last contract, so I got them kind of in the middle. So to answer your question, no, I don't think they're bringing problems.
So I also think though, if we were to look at this, I would want to see by hour of day, the number of calls that are coming in over the last year or so, and see what financial justification there is to have that staffing model based on our call volume. So we know Hopkinton has a higher call volume, and then look at ours. So I think, go ahead, James, sorry.
I say, I don't think that's an appropriate approach.
Okay,
And the reason is, even in the national standards, it's not on call volume. Because the roles, since we've been here, there's been, I turned my thing off, right? So I don't know if there's been a police call. I know there's not been a fire call. You can't, it's very challenged. And that's why I think in the study, they say you have to have minimum 2, that's the standard.
Yeah.
So it's not based on call volume, time of day, because unfortunately, in our experience, and the dispatchers can say this, is I don't know when the next multi-unit, agency call is going to be. Now, if we're talking 3 or 4 dispatchers on at a time and modeling 3, in like the study was looking at, night versus day versus midnight. There is some model for that, but it never really drops below 2.
Okay.
So I don't think that's an appropriate application of the staffing model.
Kyle, I think you're the one that said this. So when somebody said tonight, none of us are dispatchers. Totally correct, right? We have not been dispatchers, so we have not sat in your, walked in your shoes at all, for sure, which always helps when you're trying to do things like this. So just don't get mad at this question, but if over 10 years, this is a really exaggerated example, over 10 years, you have one time where you needed 2 dispatchers because of whatever happened, multiple calls or complicated calls. is it worth adding a second person for the one time in 10 years that you need it?
So I think what your question is not really completely accurate, but when you're talking about having two dispatchers, it's coming in, combining everything, like Dave said, you have the radio, the phone, and, the computer system. There is redundancy when it comes to 911. If for some reason I didn't get the phone, it goes to Hopkinton. All 911 calls are answered. Nothing goes unanswered. When we're talking about the two dispatchers, yes, there's sometimes when we do plan for it, storms, we know they're coming. We'll plan for two. I think it's a good idea. Like I said, that's just kind of how you work.
And if I may, I can tell you that in the last week, we've needed two dispatchers.
So I gave you a crazy example.
Right, it's not once every 10 years. And I think all these dispatchers can attest if there's a single dispatcher that when you have police and fire units rolling to incidents and have even two or one child which was an example, which happened in the last 72 hours of a child not breathing, that you can't say, well, that's the only time you need two dispatchers. I mean, it's happening on a frequent basis. And I think Chief Newell said, these just our current dispatchers do yeoman work. It's more than you should be doing because something's missing. Something's going to get missed, and it's not the fault of the dispatcher, it's the fault of the system we have. There's too many incidents on a too frequent basis, or two separate incidents that are involved that it's a police incident happening and a fire incident happening. And I said this in the beginning, you can't have interrupted EMD. You can't have somebody put you on hold when you're having a problem. And you can't not have a dispatcher answer you either from a fire call or police call when you need to make a critical communication. So I don't think it's fair, and it's not even a best practice nationally to have one dispatcher. Anytime.
I think
So-
to Chelsea's question, I think it's in addition to the number of calls, I think of it as having a complexity component. A call is not a call is not a call. And then there's a timing/overlap issue in terms of, when calls come in and calls come in that are overlapped or sequential, and it makes a difference in terms of staffing needed to handle it. I doubt that we have the data structure to be able to actually produce that data. I'd be surprised if we rate calls by complexity when we count calls.
I can do it by how many simultaneous calls.
Yeah, but all those things, but I guess my gut says that there is enough of that overlap to make it a real challenge to cover with one person.
So.
I'm just gonna close with saying, you guys keep saying it's not about money, it's not about money. Please come in the dispatch center before you make a decision. Please. I will give you a tour. I will sit down with you and show you everything. It's not fair that you guys are going down to Semrec and touring that facility and trying to make a decision. You need to come in Southborough. And, I'll let this speak.
Hi, Shannon Casey, dispatcher in Hopkinton. And originally I just had a very quick question because I worked overnight last night. I've only slept 3 hours and it's been a long night here, right? So I did just have a quick question. I asked Kyle, and my question was, do the residents vote on this or is it you guys? And he told me the residents don't vote, it's up to you. Hopkinton, the select board members just found out about most of these details and the study last week. So like you're asking, where do other towns stand? Again, Hopkinton select board members just found out about the study, the details last week. Residents don't even know that this is happening. So how are any of our towns making a decision for the residents when the residents don't even know? It affects the residents the most. They're the ones that are getting the services from us, right? So
Residents do vote on the budget ultimately, so that's a final control point. If the residents decide that whatever the select board decides here is not acceptable, residents could in fact not support funding for whatever we might decide. So that is a check in the process.
So tell me, who's the first? So your colleague said, select board didn't know anything. You think they at least last week found out about it. So we're gonna talk to our,
Because we met with one of them last week and we gave her the study, which she had never seen before. And we went through all these different pros and cons about it and she was shocked, honestly, because she had not heard of it yet. And we're now meeting with other select board members, but it's not like you guys are trying to make a decision like right now about whether to
You're not making
continue.
a decision tonight. We are just trying to understand whether, number one, we want to continue discussing this, and then what our next steps are. So there's no decision being made tonight as far as whether to, I mean, we don't know what the other towns want for sure.
Right.
So thank you for coming though. This has been helpful. Thank you for coming after being up all night.
Was addressed at the October meeting that the town was going to continue in this investigation of moving forward with the study. The details were not discussed in that meeting, to clarify. So they were made aware that Hopkinton was involved in the potential of regionalizing with the other towns. They were not given details.
That's it. Oh, that's all I get, I guess. Thank you.
Details about the study, the feasibility study.
I can't speak to what another town
Yeah.
has
No, you
done.
can't, of course you can't. We've been here, what, three and a half hours, 4 hours, so we're gonna cut off the public comment right now and decide what we want to do as far as our next step goes. Okay, so it sounds like we at least want to continue discussing legislation, so I'm looking at all four, everybody's nodding yes, right? No decision tonight. It sounds to me like the next step is truly to ask Mark to start, to reach out to the other three towns and understand exactly where they are in this process. Yeah, I mean, I don't see how it's going. Yeah. So, right, Chief, so you and Mark sit down, whatever, but based on what we've heard tonight, I think we've got to do that.
Well, two things. One, can we do an IMA? Is there interest in that for the other towns? If so, what might it look like? Second, in parallel, Chief, if we decide not to do that, what does it mean in terms of the budget for next week's edition? And, think seriously about what that consequence is as well.
Well,
I agree, Sam, on the IMA piece, but if these other towns aren't even discussing it, they're nowhere near.
Really, I don't think the
deciding.
question is you want to do an IMA, the question is, where are you?
Where are you?
You know, where are you in
But
this
I agree, we
process?
need to
Yeah.
move forward.
Push them on deciding. Because again, if, three of them drop out, then very different issues.
Right.
And then ask
Even if
Mark, ask to come back to us on the 6th, which is our next regular meeting,
Yeah.
and report to us what he has found out from the
Yeah.
three towns. So then we have a little bit of basis to understand what we might be able to do and not do for the time.
Yeah.
But again, if I were in the chief's position, I'd be interested in thinking of both chiefs' position. What does that mean for budget going forward if we don't do regional choice? That would be, again, if there's a need to do something sooner rather than later, at least I'd be interested in seeing what those numbers look like. And it may be a difficult challenge in the current budget environment, but at least better to know what we.
I'll work with Chief Newell,
Okay.
but I think it's would it require substantial investment
Yeah,
um,
clearly.
in staffing to make
Yeah.
sure we do the right
Yeah.
thing.
But even ballpark estimate would be helpful
Yep.
to know.
And thank you for hanging in
Thanks
there.
for
Oh,
hanging
yeah,
in there.
thank you so much.
You were a wealth of knowledge and
Very helpful.
we appreciate you and the public.
I think you're doing the right thing here. It's, you need to hear, you can't just make the decision.
So we're
Thank you
trying-
for sticking around.
And thank you, everybody. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Okay, we're not, so I think we've done what we can do for Chelsea and look at you.
Yeah.
All right, yeah, so motion to adjourn.
Second, third.